The winds that swept across the shattered ramparts of Winterfell still tasted of ash and ice when dawn bled gray upon the parapets. In the courtyard, where pyres had been stacked 3 nights running, the fires had at last guttered out, leaving beds of blackened bone and clumps of melted dragonglass pooled like dark tears in the frost-hardened mud. No songs marked the passing of the fallen. The living had nothing left in their throats but the rasp of exhaustion and a silence thick with questions none dared voice aloud. What truly becomes of death defeated, and where does the darkness flee when beaten back by mortal flame? Arya Stark felt that silence keenly as she walked the ring wall alone, her cloak snapping behind her like the tattered banner of a kingdom that no longer existed. She had ended him. So all believed, her dagger of Valyrian steel driven home beneath the circle of runes on his chest. She still saw the shock of blue shattering like glass, the implosion of frost and shadow, the wraiths of his lieutenants blowing apart like dust on the wind. Yet the quiet that followed had been wrong, as though the heartbeat of the world had skipped rather than ceased. That wrongness prickled her skin even now, a reminder that some stories refused the final stroke. Far to the north, beyond the carcass of the wall, the lands of always winter brooded beneath their perpetual storm. There, in caverns whose ceilings glittered like frozen stars, a king reborn from shards of sorcery gathered the fragments of his will around a single ember of idea: survival. The force that men had called the Night King had not perished. Only the vessel of ice fashioned for his warform had splintered. His essence, mind folded in upon itself like black water, had fled through the lattice of the spell that bound him, riding the ripple of magic that Arya's blade had cracked. It had taken root again where all oldest power came to rest, in the heart of the cold. He remembered the moment of ruin, the girl's eyes fierce as summer wolves, the dragonglass burning within him like a smothered sun, suddenly unstopped. Pain had been unknown to him for centuries, but it rendered his awareness crystalline, slicing him loose from the army of corpses that had been his voice. In that severing he discovered a heresy, an echo of his own thought, untouched by the children's bindings. Freedom. Once the rage ebbed, what remained was purpose, thin and precise. If men and dragons could turn night aside, then night must shape itself anew. No longer an endless front of death, but a realm, a people, a sovereignty forged from those who chose the chill willingly. Thus the Night King dreamed himself a kingdom. He drew the last vestiges of power stolen from weirwood and moonlit ley lines, stitched them into rings of hoarfrost that circled his ghost flesh. He walked the cavern galleries, rousing minds slumbering in bodies abandoned on distant battlefields. Giants whose hearts beat slowly beneath layers of rime, women in amber armor of the Dawn Age, silent scholars whose eyes gleamed like onyx. No longer thralls, but envoys. He taught them tongues dead before the age of heroes, wove sigils of union across their brows, and from the oldest ice wrought spires that pierced the storm clouds, so the north itself seemed crowned with jagged crystal. When scouts from the Night's Watch, less than 50 brothers still breathing, ventured beyond Eastwatch to confirm the dead were truly gone, they returned babbling of a city of mirrors glimmering on the horizon, half real, half reflected in air so cold it rang like iron. A council met in Winterfell's great hall, where soot still clung to the rafters. Bran the Broken, seated in a chair carved from heart-tree roots, listened without blinking, his gaze distant, the ravens of the world fluttering behind his eyes. Sansa weighed every spoken fear against the needs of the North she had sworn to keep safe. Jon Snow stood apart, ghostly white ghost at his heel, hearing anew the words Maester Aemon once mourned. Kill the boy, and let the man be born. War had cost them much, yet now a choice shimmered before them. March again into snow-racked peril, or treat with the very shadow that had sought their end. Diplomats were scarce in shattered Westeros. The crownless realm that remained south of the Trident still bickered over shards of legitimacy. But Davos Seaworth answered when Jon asked, because the Onion Knight had spent his life steering between monsters mightier than himself. He rode north with 6 companions, Sir Brienne among them, her oath forged in blue flame beside the living and the dead. As they passed the ruins of the wall, great blocks of ice fused into archways of slag, they saw that the breach where Viserions' fire had burned remained a dark mouth, rimmed now with crystals sharper than glass. Beyond stretched a causeway of polished frost, wide enough for an army, leading straight into the snow hills, like an unrolled parchment awaiting signatures. 3 days they traveled under a sky of swirling luminance, past statues cut from blue-black slabs whose faces resembled men long since forgotten. At dusk on the 4th day the city rose before them, if city it could be called. Its towers leaned at impossible angles, each facet scattering the waning light into spears of color that stabbed the gloom. Between those towers flowed rivers of mist, and on bridges of ice walked figures neither wholly living nor wholly dead, their footfalls ringing with a hollow music that reminded Davos of wind chimes over deep water. The Night King received them in a hall hollowed from a singular glacier, its inner walls glimmering with scenes trapped like insects in amber. Brienne, broad as a bear, felt small beneath that vaulting frieze. Yet the king looked almost human now, a man of pallid flesh veined with frost, dark hair bound at the nape, eyes no longer blinding sapphire, but the pale gray of moonlit snow. Unsettling, yes, but touched with thought. Around his throat hung a torque of interlocked dragonglass shards glowing faintly violet. His voice, when it came, bore no hateful rasp. It was low, deliberate, the sound of water sheeting down winter cliffs. He spoke of peace, though not the peace of surrender. "I would have a pact," he said, words misting in the charged air. "The realms of men to the south, the realm of night to the north. A wall of flesh failed us both. Let memory and covenant stand in its place." Now, Davos, answering for them all, asked what subjects this northern crown might claim. The Night King's lips curved, not quite a smile. He gestured, and the ice behind him brightened, revealing shapes within. Hard-ridden free folk, kneeling beside the resurrected bones of their kin. Crannog men, who had vanished from the neck in the first spring, after the long night. Pale children whose eyes swirled with blue motes like fireflies. "Those who cannot find a place in the new order of the South," he said, "will find sanctuary here. The dead will serve alongside the breathing. There will be no hunger. Snow is generous when commanded. And there will be law. No blades turned without cause, no slaves chained in fear, and no forgetting the cost of oblivion." When Davos pressed about tribute, the Night King offered treasure more precious than gold: knowledge. He would teach them the sorcery that bound wind to sail even in calm seas, the crafting of glass that never shattered, the weaving of memory into stone so a singer's tale might live forever. But for such gifts, he demanded in return a single vow: that the South cease sending warriors beyond the frost fangs, and in times of great need, should endless summer threaten to parch the land, they would permit the night to send storms southward, to drink the heat and cool the earth again. The envoys departed under the hush of falling snow, fine as ash, their minds divided. Some felt seduced by the promise of marvels. Brienne felt only the weight of compromise pressed cold against her ribs. Yet she could not deny the transformation wrought in the being once thought pure starvation of the world. On their journey back, they spoke little, each wrestling with fears that any peace born in the grave might pull the living toward that grave in time. Jon awaited their report with furrowed brow, his thoughts already galloping down branching futures. Bran listened wordlessly, a faint tremor in his hand, the only sign that something vast moved inside him, some calculation of balance between green life and white death. Councils multiplied from Winterfell to Old Town. Archmaesters debated in candlelit libraries whether a kingdom of the dead could honor a treaty. Septons muttered of abomination and divine wrath. Lords measured cost against opportunity, and peasants whispered that perhaps ghosts had hearts softer than kings of flesh. While they argued, winter's grip weakened, as though the Night King's withdrawal drew the cold with him. Rivers thawed. Buds ventured tentative green on blackened limbs. The small folk named it Mercy's Spring, and more than one wondered if the end of war with death itself had opened doors to salvation. No steel-clad monarch ever could. Yet peace, delicate as ice filigree, required faith. So the Night King sent tokens south, obsidian gowns that shed no warmth upon the wearer, yet left her unharmed in blizzard. lamps whose pale flames fed on vapor and never dimmed, scrolls inscribed in runes that, when read aloud, raised crystalline seedlings from bare earth. Gift by gift, fear thawed into wary awe. Trade caravans began their slow crawl along the cracked bones of the King's Road, bearing wool, bronze, apples, the simplest proofs of trust, northward, returning with barrels of powdered snow that brewed to a cordial sweeter than mead, and with tales of translucent wolves that guided travelers through white-out darkness, without asking recompense but a whispered song. Not all welcomed this new accord. In the Vale, Lady Royce denounced it as sorcery that would rot the courage of men and leave them docile before nightmare. In the Reach, scheming lords feared the North's rise in commerce and whispered of forging an alliance with the Iron Bank to outfit fleets that might strike the Frost City before it grew impregnable. Yet armies reeling from the last war had scant appetite for fresh bloodshed. And so winter and summer reached across the ruins of the wall with tentative fingers, daring to dream of holding, rather than clashing. Seasons turned. In the deep north, the Night King walked terraces of living snow where children of the free folk raced pale elk under the shimmer of aurora, their laughter carrying through the cold like silver bells. He stood upon balconies of ice that faced the world's end and wondered, in what lingering patch of the man he had been, whether peace would feel less like a chain than war. Still, he kept watch, for hearts of men shifted as swiftly as cloud shadow, and the lesson of ages remained. Warmth breeds forgetfulness, and forgetfulness invites ruin. South of the Frostfangs, Jon Snow rode to every holdfast from Dorne to the Twins, speaking of balance, of scars remembered, of allies found in unlikely frost. He bore on his sword belt a dagger of dragonglass, sister to Arias, symbol of the hinge upon which fate had turned. Children gathered to touch it and marveled that death could be forged into safeguard. In taverns Jon drank with veterans who once shivered at the Night King's very name, and he spoke not of dread but of the price already paid, a price dear enough to purchase possibility. When next he crossed the causeway of polished frost, it was not at the head of an army, but with masons eager to trade secrets of quarry and ore. The Night King received them on steps, sculpted to resemble curling dragon tongues. Two monarchs, one of ice and one of wounds still healing, regarded each other without helmets, without pretense, without the preordained malice of prophecy. Between them yawned the memory of countless slain, yet on that frozen threshold they found something stranger than forgiveness, understanding. Thus a kingdom of night took root where once only silence reigned, and from its glaciers spilled quiet marvels that shimmered in southern markets like the reflections of hidden stars. Farmland revived beneath subtle flurries called forth each summer's eve to cool the scorched soil. Great libraries rose whose walls remembered every song sung within them. And in Winterfell, Arya trained acolytes not to slay frozen specters, but to dance the thin line between shadow and light, teaching that a blade poised to end can also guard. Still, on nights when the moon hid behind torn veils of storm, rumors crept like chill fingers along the spine of the world. Whispers that the Night King gazed upon horizons no treaty could confine, eyes agleam with ambitions unspoken. Murmurs that the children's old magics, stirred anew, might yet demand a reckoning for the chains of ice, broken in ancient rebellion. Peace, though precious, was a cloak stitched of fragile thread. It warmed so long as each hand held a part of its fabric, but should any loosen their grip, winter would slip inside. And so, from the snows of the newly risen Frostspire to the green valleys where willows dipped into gentle streams, the people of Westeros lived in the hush between breaths, keenly aware that kingdoms born of miracle and memory alike must be guarded not by swords alone but by stories carried forward. Stories that remembered both the terror of endless night and the dawn that had dared to treat with it. In that telling, hope found root, twining up through the charred ruin of war like ivy seeking the sun, its leaves trembling but alive. The lark call of a single ice swallow spiraled through dawnlit arches of translucent frost. silencing the murmurs of sentries who lingered on terrace edges of the Frostspire city. Its wings, thin as parchment and veined with sapphire, cut the air in lazy loops before settling beside a hunched figure shrouded in mottled gray. The bird's needlebeak tapped at a pale hand gloved by columns of frost, and the motion coaxed Sova, once known as Karsi of the Free Folk, back from the dreamless reverie that came only after sleepless nights. She rose from her crouch, felt the cold sluice through joints that had carried 1,000 leagues of burden, and fixed her eyes upon the far horizon. Amber radiance bled across fields of white-capped dunes. Beyond them, the jumbled peaks of the Frostfangs towered like a rent jaw gnawing on sky. Somewhere beneath those ridges, the living pulse of the Night King's nascent kingdom throbbed, every breath of its citizens bound by a promise to hold no blade without cause. The rule sat on Karsi's shoulders, heavier than any chain she'd once worn beneath Hardhome's collapsed palisades, and the weight eased only when she gazed southward, toward the place she'd fled and might yet return. She did not intend to defect. Hers was a scouting mission, sanctioned by the Night King's circle of envoys, giants, scholars, children of dusk and dawn, for word had reached Frostspire that an expedition of southern sellswords, financed by Reach lords, had slipped across the shivering sea to land on the desolate shore east of Hardhome. They carried wildfire in iron casks and crossbows, strung with horsehair soaked in obsidian oil, weapons built not only to pierce flesh, but to unravel the sorcery that fused ice and life inside the Night King's newest allies. Their captains believed any corpse striding in his service remained bound by unnatural threads. If burned to ash, those threads would snap, and the Kingdom of Night would starve for lack of bodies. Karsi adjusted the obsidian axes slung across her back and descended an outer stair, each step resonating through unseen cavities in the Frostspire's belly, as though she walked upon the ribs of some ancient dead god. Her boot soles, shod in hide cured with frost sage, made no sound against the glass. She reached a vaulted hall where crystalline stalactites dangled like spears, and in the center of its polished floor stood the Night King. He wore a mantle seamless as black water, fastened with an unbroken shard of purple dragonglass that pulsed to an internal heartbeat. Hers? His? She could never be sure. Moon-pale eyes regarded her, unblinking, and the silence between them felt like snow falling in a dream. Only after she bowed, as custom demanded, did he speak. "Wolves circle at our perimeter," he said, voice devoid of malice. "Seek their fire before it finds our roots." Karsi nodded. "I will leave with first wind." Not alone. From a corridor where the air shimmered with residual frost, stepped a figure tall as Karsi's shoulders, yet built of angles too smooth to belong to flesh. Its body was sheathed in scales of compressed ice, each plate shot through with silver threads of spider-frozen water. He, carried a glaive forged from the fused rib of a mastodon and a spine of dragon glass. The being inclined its head to Karsi in greeting, and she noticed eyes within the helmetless visage, dark pits flickering with spirals of pale green, not the Night King's blue. "This one is Viridian," the Night King murmured. "A new soul shaped from the bedrock of our city. He bears no memory of the wars before. Your eyes will guide him." Karsi felt a pang of uncertainty. She knew flesh and blood, fragile and defiant. But she also knew rebirth. Many of her people slain at Hardhome now walked these streets, no longer thralls but peers. They wore their scars in halos of frost that never melted, and behind their eyes she had seen longing, sorrow, love, all impossible once. So she accepted Viridian's silent pledge with a nod. The Night King lifted one hand, nails like opalescent talons, and plucked from thin air a flake of ice no larger than a coin. Upon its surface, threads of silver etched a map, the ragged shoreline east of Hardhome in red runes, marking the sellswords' encampment. As the flake touched Karsi's palm, it melted, knowledge sinking into her flesh like a vivid memory of a place she had never seen. "Return before the second full moon if able," the Night King said, gaze sweeping them both. "Peace requires guardians unseen." In Winterfell's Godswood, the weirwood's white bark bled sap the color of fresh blood, a trick of sunrise that never failed to unsettle those who carried ghosts in their memories. Jon Snow watched the crimson tears drip onto roots that had drunk the blood of men and ravens alike. Beside him, Arya knelt on one knee, her cloak furled around her like the shadow of a hawk. She wiped sweat from her cheek where her hair, grown longer in recent months, had stuck to her skin while sparring with a dozen eager recruits she'd taken under her secret tutelage. Jon exhaled. Messenger returned from White Harbor an hour past. The Manderleys have formed a pact with Gulltown, Starfall, and 3 Riverlords. They name themselves the Covenant of the Dawn. Arya arched an eyebrow. Covenant sounds noble, but I hear they carry Reach gold. They do, he said. Gold and fear. They mean to raise a host large enough to break any alliance we keep with the Night King. Arya rose, rolled her shoulders. Why fear what keeps the Long Night at bay? Because they fear surrendering power more, Jon replied. The dead do not pay taxes. Trade with Frostspire cuts out lords who've grown fat on tariffs. Our peace threatens pockets deeper than the Dreadfort's crypts. Arya chuckled softly. Shall I pay them a visit? 1 dagger in the dark for each golden goose. Then, Jon forced a smile. If only it were that simple. We must prove peace with the night benefits them. Not bury our cause under assassins' whispers. I ride south tomorrow to treat with Sam at Old Town. Knowledge may turn more hearts than steel. His sister's eyes, gray, flint, alive, studied him. We walk sharper blades than ever. She said, if you fall, my needle will not stay silent. He rested a hand on her shoulder. I know. Across the yard, Bran Stark emerged from the great keep, pushed by Maester Wolkan in the wheeled chair, whose spokes were carved from heart-tree wood. The birds perched among the godswood branches stilled mid-song. Arya and Jon paused, for Bran's face bore the distance of 1,000 leagues, but his lips twitched as though tasting bitter wind. Ravens bring visions, he said as he neared. The west grows restless. Ships bearing wildfire sail the coast of seals. Wolves in shadow prowl behind banners of silver mermaids. Jon felt haste coil in his belly like a drawn bowstring. How long? Not long, Bran answered. Yet the greater threat roosts beneath our feet. He pointed to the soil between the heart-tree roots. Prophecy stirs. The song of ice and fire hums a discordant note. The world survived the long night because night chose not to press the knife. But if day bleeds night, we will know what true oblivion is. Arya inhaled. So our fates still hinge upon choices. All stories do, Bran murmured. South along the King's Road, beyond the last hearth and the giftlands, reclaimed for new crofts. Carts rattled with casks of Paleroot wine, bales of northern flax, and crates of dragonglass arrowheads, exchanged for crescent glass arrowheads, exchanged for crescent glass, Frostspires, unbreakable mirrors prized by healers and mages. In one such cart rode Master Corran, dispatched by the Citadel to catalogue the unnatural commerce. He wore the 7-linked chain of full maesterdom, yet each time the wagon's wheel struck a rut, he clutched his satchel as if the road itself reached for him. His escort, a lean woman named Elena Waters, once a Lyseni Cellsail, grinned beneath her fox-fur hood at his unease. First journey north? She teased. Corran cleared his throat. I studied here in youth, but that was before the wall fell. Before. Elena's expression softened. Before the dead marched. He nodded. I saw the sky burn across the sea in Old Town. Dragons of night, some whispered. Yet when the raven arrived proclaiming peace, Archmaester Brulóft spat fire of his own. He bids me measure the pulse of heresy. Now. And what does your heart tell you? Corran looked at the darkening tree line where snowdrops bored through slush. My heart says knowledge seldom wears only one mask. I shall fit the truth to a shape none can deny. Their conversation halted as a thunder of hooves shattered forest calm. A column of riders in field plate, emblazoned with mermaids and moon lilies, galloped into view. The leading knight, helm crowned by antler-like fins, brandished a scroll. In the name of the Covenant of the Dawn, you are ordered to seize all contraband destined for Frostspire and redirect it to White Harbor for inspection," he shouted. Elena's hand fell to her saber. Corin swallowed. "Sir, I carry letters from the Citadel." The knight flicked reins, moved closer. "Knowledge too, then. We will examine your papers after we search the cargo for treason." His gaze lingered on their dragonglass crates. Sorcery disguised his trade. Elena stepped between cart and riders. "If you loot this cargo, you sever a thread of peace. Peace with corpses is rot in harvest." The knight's sneer twisted within the helm. "Stand down." Corin's mind raced. He saw the Covenant Lord's fear writ large in this boldness. If Frostpire's gifts were withheld, Winterfell's trust would wane. War could follow, giving the Reach its old markets back. So he chose the only tool left, his voice. He raised both arms. "Sir, take me as surety if you must, but let the cargo pass. Without those crates, Winterfell cannot pay Frostspire its due, and the Night King's envoys may take offense." "Then go." Elena shot him a look sharp as starlight. The knight considered, then barked to his men. They unhitched Corin's cart from Elena's wagon, tethered it behind their own procession, and ordered him astride a destrier. As hooves churned sludge into cold spray, Corin's thoughts turned to Old Town scriptoriums where men debated abstractions behind walls of granite. Out here, doctrine bled. Hardhome's Bay froze only in midwinter, yet the water ringing the old wharves now lay beneath a glaze of ice thick enough to bear the weight of 2 iron galleys dragged ashore. Their hulls, painted green and gold, bore the sigil of House Caswell, a lesser Reach name eager to rise by daring. Sergeant Grant, veteran of the Golden Company and newly minted sellsword captain, knelt beside a makeshift forge hammered together from bricks scavenged in Veline ruins. Flames licked a pot of pitch, in which black-fletched bolts soaked. He tested the head of one arrow, obsidian-coated steel, against a plate of iron and felt grim pleasure at the sparks that leapt. These would kill whites, sages assured him, burn them inside out. Now he intended to prove it. Behind him, a young maester in tattered gray sorted satchels of powdered wildfire. The sellswords called the man Pox, because his cheeks bore scars of child fever, but his mind burned bright. He coughed into a rag. "The green flame obeys when sealed under wax," he muttered. "But split a seam and winter air may spark it before we wish." Grant grunted. "Then seal them thrice." Pox stared across the camp, where 50 tents huddled in ditches dug into permafrost. "If rumor proves true, and the Night King spawns ice beasts, our traps must ignite on contact." "They will." Grant spat. "And if not, we still have swords." A horn call cut the morning hush. 3 clear blasts. Scouts dashed downhill. The lead scout's eyes were wide as moon. "Shapes east, Captain," he hissed. 2 figures only, yet they walk straight through drifts waist high and leave no prints. Grant's jaw clenched. He ordered archers to the ridge and unslung a crossbow. Peering through whirling snow, he glimpsed a woman clad in fur and bone, axes glinting at her hips, strides fluid as wind. Beside her strode something like a knight carved from frozen rivers, its armor reflecting broken dawn. The sellswords murmured prayers. Some drew away. Pox muttered hex runes. "What?" Grant leveled his weapon and shouted, "Halt! Advance and die again!" The woman raised a hand. "I am Karcia Frostspire. This ground was once our hearth. We would speak." "Speak of surrender," Grant barked. "Speak of leaving before blood seeds the snow." Laughter, a brittle thing, broke from Grant's throat. "You have no army behind you." "I have horizon," Karcia answered. "Step beyond it, and you face more than numbers." Grant felt unease ripple through his line. He pointed at Viridian. "That one, do you control it? Or does it control you?" "It is companion," Karcia said. "Made new, not enslaved old." "Test then." Grant snapped fingers. Archers fired. Arrows shrieked through sleet. Viridian spun, glaive blurring, deflecting shafts in a storm of splinters. One bolt struck his pauldron. shattered, scattering obsidian dust that hissed against his chill. He raised a palm. Frost lanced outward, encasing 2 advancing sellswards in a shell of clear ice. Their eyes rolled in terror behind ephemeral walls. Pox screamed an incantation. A satchel burst, unleashing a tongue of green flame that surged toward Viridian. Karsi hurled herself between, axes crossed. The wildfire struck her blades, but instead of engulfing her, it guttered, quenched by an aura of cold that radiated from her partner. When frost met flame, steam erupted, shrouding the field. Grent signaled retreat to inner trenches, but in the whiteout Karsi's voice carried, edged with sorrow. "We came to parley," you answered with fire. "Now you will learn what Frost remembers." From the blizzard rose shapes, not shambling wights, but lithe hunters bound in ice-etched armor. Their eyes were green like Viridians, and each wielded crescent spears of bone. They poured from thin air, as though carved from the gale itself. Grent loosed another bolt. It shattered against the first attacker's breast, revealing within not rot but crystalline muscle. The sellsword's line broke. Some fled across the frozen bay, and the ice cracked under wildfire heat, swallowing them in howling green maelstroms. When the mist cleared, Grent lay on his back, staring into a sky painted with ribbons of aurora. Karsi knelt over him, axes sheathed. "We warned," she said. "Now choose exile, or rebuild this bay as bridge, not breach." Grent closed his eyes. His dreams of gold shriveled like parchment in the forge. But within him, something unexpected stirred. Awe. He coughed blood, nodded once. "A bridge," he whispered. In Old Town's highest roost of the high tower, Samwell Tarly sat opposite Jon Snow, quill dripping blue ink onto vellum where equations of population and harvest yields sprawled. Sam's cheeks flushed red as he spoke. "The Night King's trade reduces famine risk by 1/3, Jon. Snow cordials alone replenish water in parched fields. If these numbers circulate, lords will beg for more shipments." Jon leaned back. "Yet, they fear sorcery. The familiar shape of survival will conquer that fear," Sam replied. "Let them taste peace." He gestured to an iron-bound chest at his feet. "Crescent mirrors, frostglass beads that glow when crops thirst. Miracles you can touch." A rap on the chamber door interrupted. Gilly poked her head in, babe on her hip. "Forgive me," she said, "but the raven from Winterfell insists on your eyes, Sam." He took the scroll, skimming quickly. Brow furrowed. "Maester Corran captured near last hearth." He looked at Jon. Without him, the Citadel's neutrality might fracture. Jon rose, gaze narrowing. "Then I ride for Corran." Sam grabbed his sleeve. "Bring the mirrors. Show them what future they risk by chain and ransom." Bendo. In the Covenant encampment near White Harbor, Maester Corran sat chained in a drafty tent. Lord Roderick Manderly, the younger cousin of Fat Wyman, paced before him. "We hold you to temper the northern wolf," Manderly snarled. "But he comes with teeth we'll shear more than pelts." Corran met the Lord's stare with unexpected calm. "If he comes, consider what ice may walk at his side." A herald burst in. "Lord, there is a procession at the southern gate. A caravan of glass." Manderly stalked out. Corran shuffled behind, chain scraping. What he saw rooted the crowd in silent wonder. Wagons defended by knights of Winterfell carried towering mirrors curving like crescent moons. As sunlight struck their surfaces, beams refracted, casting dancing motes of soft sapphire across the throng and revealing etched images within each pane. Farmers turning soil that sprouted green under snowfall. Ships sailing through mists parted by radiant crystals. Children drinking shining water, poured frost-chased chalices. Jon Snow rode at their head on a pale gelding. He dismounted before Manderly, removed gloves. "My lord," he called over murmuring masses, "here is the future you bargain against." He nodded to Sam, who stepped forward with a brazier. Into it he placed a slender shard of crescent glass. As flame licked, the glass glowed, releasing a smell of summer rain. Steam rose and coalesced into a sphere of water above the brazier, suspended by invisible threads. Gasps erupted. Sam reached up, pressing his palm to the floating globe. When he withdrew, the imprint of his hand remained, rippling like a pond's surface. "This is no trick," Sam said. "This is memory rendered useful, a gift from night to preserve day." He closed his fist. The sphere burst into cool mist that drifted over the watchers, settling on flushed cheeks and parched lips like dew at dawn. The crowd cheered. Manderley swallowed hard. Trade with night no longer felt like surrender. It felt like harvest. Corin saw doubt fracture within the Lord's eyes. But doubt alone could not thwart those already committed to sabotage. On a hillside beyond the city walls, a cloaked figure watched through a spyglass. Sir Brynden Flowers, bastard of the once Valyrian house Celtigar, had sworn fealty to Lady Royce Shadow Council. He observed Yon's pageant and hissed. Beside him, a pyromancer stirred casks of wildfire loaded into catapults. "Torch the mirrors," Flowers ordered. "Let the show end in green fire. Blame frost sorcery gone awry." Crews cranked arms, lit fuses. Yet before the first lever fell, a shadow passed overhead. A cry went up as a beast of scale and flame. A dragon, circled, wings beating waves of heat. Rhaegal, last of Daenerys' children, descended with a roar that turned men's marrow to water. On his back rode a woman in leathers, the color of dusk. Queen Asha of the Iron Islands, friend to Jon Snow and reluctant steward of the skies since Drogon had vanished beyond the summer sea. Asha's voice thundered. "Drop those arms or taste dragon fire." Flowers cursed, cut a fuse, but sparks leapt to a cask. Green tongues licked sky. Rhaegal's chest swelled. Orange flame met green, birthing a vortex of shrieking light. In the maelstrom, catapults ignited. Crews hurled themselves onto mud, and wildfire detonated in a chain that painted the hillside in spectral agony. From among the wreckage, Brynden Flowers staggered aflame, screaming oaths. A last gout of orange consumed him. In the city below, mirrors reflected the duel of flame colors and held it harmless, redirecting heat upward in pillars of light. The crowd witnessed destruction transmuted to spectacle, terror neutralized by the very sorcery they had feared. Jon turned to Manderley. "That," he said quietly, "is what peace buys." The Night King could have answered with endless winter, yet he gives us shields against ruin. "Damn?" Manderley fell to one knee. "Forgive my blindness. I will send riders to break the covenant." Jon helped him stand. "Send them with gifts. Build trust on ruby soil." In Frostspire's sunken hall, the Night King watched memory unfold in a lattice of frost above an obsidian font. Scenes of wildfire and dragonfire, of mirrors shining, of hearts bending toward possibility, drifted like autumn leaves trapped in amber. Beside him stood Bran Stark, eyes white with raven sight. "They choose mercy," Bran said, "forged from fear and wonder." The Night King's breath plumed. "So the wheel turns a new spoke." Bran blinked, returned to himself, and regarded the ancient being. "Yet another covenant strains," he warned. "The Iron Bank of Braavos funds mercenaries sailing to the Orkwood Islands. They mean to choke sea roots feeding your kingdom." A silent pause opened. Then the Night King inclined his head, almost a bow. "Trade shifts easily from sea to sky," he said. "I have considered shaping storms as escorts, clouds hollowed to bear cargo." He raised one hand. Miniature thundercloud flickered above his palm. "But storms are blunt implements. The world must see Night's craft, not its cudgel." Bran touched the weirwood-carved spoke of his chair. "What do you propose?" "A festival," the Night King answered, surprising himself with the word. He envisioned torches of ice that burned blue without heat, dances beneath auroras guided by drums carved from mammoth ivory, contests where living and remade tested woodcraft together. Invite every realm. Let them walk our streets, share food brewed from snow and hearthfire, and leave with stories no coin can purchase. "Bye." Bran smiled, a faint curve that seldom touched his lips. "Hope thrives when strangers break bread." He gazed toward distant Winterfell. "I will send ravens." Weeks later, banners fluttered above Frostspire like ribbons strung from invisible hands. The stark direwolf snapped silver beside the crowned stag of Baratheon reborn under Gendry's forge hammer. Red wine grapes danced above Dornish suns, and even the slender tree of Bravos flapped shyly among them, though the Iron Bank's envoys carried ledgers thicker than shields. Over ivory steps, thousands ascended into the city carved from frozen starfall. They gaped at halls where orchestras of wind chimes played themselves, at hawkers selling snow cordials that tasted of childhood summers, at living statues swirling in duets with dancers of flesh, their limbs trailing stardust frost. At the festival's eve, Carsey returned unscathed save for sorrowful tales of Hardhome, walked among stalls, lighting paper lanterns, stamped with wolf and snowflake sigils. Children followed Viridian, daring to touch his crystalline gauntlet, delighted when chips of ice blossomed into roses that drifted upward like petals, seeking constellations. On the highest promenade, Arya met the Night King for the first time since ending his war form. She searched his moon eyes, looking for that final shiver of malice she had once pierced. Instead, she found quiet gravity, as though he watched creation unfold and counted its heartbeats. "Do you regret sparing us?" she asked bluntly. "That was never my wish," he replied. "I was weapon-wrought by fear. You broke the blade. I choose now to be smith." Arya studied him, then drew her Valyrian steel dagger, still gleaming with a whisper of frostbite where it had touched his heart. She handed it to him, hilt first. "A reminder," she said. "Peace is edged as keenly as war." He cradled the weapon, thumb tracing the ancient runes. Then he offered it back. "Your hands know its balance. Guard the space between breaths." Bender. From terraces above came the echo of horns, southern and northern, high and low. The world gathered, and beneath swirling auroras, the Night King stepped forward to address them in the common tongue. "We meet at edge of dark and dawn," he began, voice rippling through glass pillars into marrow of all who listened. "Many died for this silence in which we speak. Let us not waste it. Let living learn from the unliving. Let night borrow warmth from day, and day shelter in night's cool embrace. When suns parch the earth, so shall wheel of seasons spin without grinding us beneath." Amen. His words rolled outward like gentle tide, lifting hearts. Even the Iron Bank's stoic chief scribe found himself blinking away tears of half-remembered lullabies. Beneath the speech, however, forces of discord stirred. In a tavern carved from a single blue glacier tooth, a sellsword called Tarla, the Viper passed among patrons trading grievances. She had served with Grent once, until he knelt to Carsey and fled disgrace. Now she sought coin to avenge that humiliation. Her purse filled quickly from hands that feared peace more than war profits lost. She spoke of ways wildfire might seep into Frostspire's catacombs, of how the Night King's power thrummed from a core deeper than any mind. If shattered, the city would fall, burying treaties under a tomb of ice. She never noticed Viridian's disguise, a cloak of soot, face bandaged like a contagion survivor, listening from a shadowed alcove. Nor did she mark Bran's ravens perched on rafters, recording every seditious syllable. Plans took root, but so did watchful countermeasures. On festival's final night, when twin moons rose, one pale, one robed in molten bronze, lanterns soared, borne by heated snow vapor contained within translucent membranes. They drifted among spires, each inscribed with wishes of peace in dozens of tongues. Jon and Sansa stood together near an arched bridge, watching lights ascend. "Do you believe this can last?" Sansa asked softly. "I believe it must," Jon murmured. "We spent too long fighting shadows cast by our own torches. Now we share the light." From the crowd emerged Davos, carrying a sealed vellum scroll. "My queen," he addressed Sansa with practiced ease. "Message from White Harbor. The covenant dissolves. Lords pledge grain and ships for next winter." Sansa's smile wavered. "Then next winter may be the first we greet without dread." Davos turned to Jon. "But this letter also names riders beyond the Frostfangs, unknown banners, a new host amassing among ruins of ancient strongholds." Jon frowned. "More sellswords?" Davos shook his head. "Or worse. Scouts spoke of banners stitched with a burning tree. Some claim it belongs to sorcerers hailing from Ashai. Then Tianan. A cold breeze passed, ruffling cloaks. Joan's gaze lifted to the Night King reading portents in the heavens. Peace is a garden, Davos, he whispered. We have planted seeds. Now we guard against weeds. Below the city, in caverns womb dark and heavy with primeval hush, Tarla the Viper and her conspirators crawled through tunnels, lit by glowworm clusters. They carried earthen pots of wildfire sealed in clay. Tarla's smile gleamed like broken bones. The Night King's heart lies ahead, she hissed. We strike, the spell shatters, ice crumbles, and every trade lord will fill our cups for ending this charade. Her torch sputtered as a draft of frigid air swept through. Suddenly, frost slicked the tunnel walls. Tarla froze, teeth chattering. Shadows coalesced at the passage's end, forming a silhouette tall and glimmering with internal starlight. Viridian stepped forward, glaive balanced loosely. No farther, he said in a voice reverberating with wind over ice fields. Tarla cursed, hurled a pot. Green fire erupted against Viridian's chest, then extinguished with a pop as steam devoured flame. The conspirators scattered, but walls closed in, liquid ice reshaping into bars. Ravens burst from the dark, swirling around them, their cause merging into a single voice. Brands, echoing inside minds, choices define the song. Choose life. Tarla trembled as the green glow dimmed. She sank to her knees, plans unraveling in bitter tears. Viridian deconstructed the wildfire pots into harmless salt crystals with a wave, then offered the would-be saboteurs a path: exile beyond the shivering sea, or sentences of service reforged under Frostspire's laws. They chose exile. And so the first true test of peace concluded without blood. When dawn whitened the festival's ashes, the Night King met Jon Snow atop the Mirror Bridge. Below them, meltwater streamed through channels, carved straight to farmland south of the wall, Frostspire's gift of nourishment. I saw dark roots under our foundations, the Night King said. Fear feeds them still. Jon watched traders pack wagons for southbound routes. Fear is human. Even I wake some nights expecting blade of ice through ribs. And yet, you come, the Night King observed, voice almost gentle. Because winter taught me courage isn't the absence of fear, Jon answered. It is facing tomorrow, knowing fear will follow, but stepping forward anyway. The Night King closed his eyes. In that stillness, he felt heartbeat of thousands, living, remade, sharing a world that might endure. Then let tomorrow come, he whispered. We will walk it together, you and I, frost and fire, until both find rest. Jon extended a hand. The Night King's own, colder than starlight, clasped it. Frost formed intricate fractals across Jon's glove, while warmth bled into the Night King's knuckles. Neither flinched. Thus another covenant, forged not from steel or stone, but from understanding, took shape beneath Aurora's watchful shimmer. And though storms would rise, of politics, of greed, of creeping shadow skulking past the edge of maps, memory of this moment spread through every lantern tale, every weaver's thread, every lullaby whispered into newborn ears. For if night itself could choose peace, then so might any soul beneath the same sky, given heed enough to see beyond first fear to the promise rising on the far horizon. A kingdom shared, not ruled, a dawn where daylight and darkness no longer warred, but turned the wheel together in patient, perpetual twilight. Mist clung to the valleys south of the Frostfangs like milk poured over slate, muting every hue until the world seemed carved from one long exhale. In that hush, riders advanced beneath banners too new to bear weatherwear. A burning tree sigil embroidered in red and sable, its roots shaped like grasping talons. They numbered scarcely 100 yet cut a silhouette unnaturally tall. Mail glimmered with iridescent sheen, as though each link had been quenched in strange light. At their head rode a woman masked in lacquered wood painted gold, the grain carved into running script none this side of Ashai could read. Behind her, trundled black wagons, draped in tarps, the color of bruised dusk. At every muddy ford in Shepherd's Gate, she offered coin, stamped with a sunrise missing its sun. At every toll she left the gatekeeper shivering, unable to recall the color of her eyes. When the column crested the last ridge before the Bay of Seals, spies loyal to the Iron Bank, who shadowed Jon Snow's camp like persistent winter flies, watched from tangled heather and sensed a rival bid, outsiders gambling on the same precarious board. They loosed falcons westward, messages bound to crimson rings, but the birds never cleared the tree line. The woman's riders twitched pale fingers, and shadows slid up trunks to snip the air itself. Feathers drifted like severed thoughts. On the Frostspire's mirrored heights, the Night King felt that severance as a tremor spider webbing the lattice of memory he used for sight. He paused mid-sentence while explaining to Samuel Tarley the mathematics binding snow cordials to field yield. His moon-gray eyes narrowed, and frost pooled under his bare feet. Sam stammered, losing track of a calculation about barley quotas, but the Night King lifted a placating hand, oddly gentle for a being who once commanded storms. An echo of elsewhere, he murmured. Not yet discord, but a string plucked. Sam gathered his parchments. Should I inform Jon? The Night King regarded the maester with a depth that made Sam feel suddenly transparent. He will know soon, but knowledge delivered too quickly can splinter trust. Let the wheel turn a measure. Trust had become Jon Snow's sternest tutor. In White Tusk Pavilion pitched outside White Harbor, he sat with Lord Roderick Manderley and Lady Barbary Dustin, reviewing the newly signed Compact of Coasts, an accord promising ships for Frostspire trade in exchange for grain, cooled by artificial winter winds. Davos Seaworth leaned over the parchment, candle glow mapping every wrinkle on his sea-scarred face. Lord, Davos said to Manderley. See this clause? Winds to be summoned only at joint request of Northern Council and Frostspire envoy. Prevents accusations of unnatural squalls ruining southern harvests. Lady Dustin tapped the parchment. Fine words. But gulls cannot read contracts. If sudden gales wreck Old Town's armada, they'll blame magic, not ink. Jon's jaw tightened. Old Town's admiral sits in this very tent. He nodded toward Lord Leighton Hightower's daughter Melora, robed in cartographer's indigo 1T. We sign because storms already claim lives. We aim to tame them. Melora smiled faintly, pen poised. Sailors fear calm seas more. Peace untested breeds complacency. Then the first rogue wave swallows a fleet. I will sign, Snow, on faith that your Night King honors tide's balance. Before the quills could descend, a sentry burst in, helm askew. Riders in the east, my lords, unknown banners. Their scouts silence ours. Jon rose, cloak swirling. Ghost padded beside him, a silent question in every sinew. Lady Dustin gripped her dagger's pommel. Manderley muttered about conspiracies thicker than eel stew. Only Davos showed weary acceptance. Storms, literal or not, forever waited beyond canvas walls. Mount what horses we have, Jon ordered. We ride to parley before sharpened edges decide intent. They found the strangers camped beneath black pines, their wagons circled like teeth around a single bronze brazier that burned without fuel. The masked woman greeted Jon with a bow so fluid it felt rehearsed beneath foreign moons. Up close her mask depicted not a face but a sun in eclipse, rays flaring from a void the color of dried blood. I am Vahara, she said, voice low as undertow. Speaker for the Arcane Order. We come bearing the seed of dawn for realms that dream of endless dusk. Jon weighed each word. These lands are under a cord of peace. What seed do you plant that skulks in shadow? She gestured. Two riders hauled a tarp aside. In the wagon's gloom sat a sphere of dull iron, runes throbbing ember red across its surface. The air around it shimmered with heat, though snow hissed off its lid. This heart, Vihara said, stores sunlight distilled by spell and lens. Release it midwinter and 100 leagues thaw. No famine. No frostbite, no fear of night. Her gaze flicked northward, past Jon's shoulder, toward Frostspire's distant aurora. Your king of cold promises mercy and chill. We promise the end of chill entirely. Davos breath plumed. An end to seasons invites worse hungers. Crops tilt under constant heat. Rivers shrink. Vara tilted her mask. Balance has two faces. You wed yourselves to one. Then? Ghost bared teeth. Fur bristling. Unseen magic raked the wolf's instincts raw. Jon sensed it too. The sphere pulsed like a dragon egg starved of release. He touched his dagger of dragon glass unconsciously. Shards within hummed in warning. There will be counsel, he said. Until then your camp must remain watched. No further. Of course, Vihara purred, and the brazier's flames bent toward her as if adoring. At Frostpyre, Arya Stark sparred beneath icicle colonnades, with a cadre of silent acolytes, free folk children who learned her water dance footwork, each movement trailing snowflake ribbons. Bran observed from a balcony, ravens nesting on the railing. Mid-faint, Arya felt a ripple, the same flutter Bran always called a turning page. She lowered blades. What did you see? Bran's pupils dilated like deep-water wells. Heat heart beating south of the pines. Fire caged for ransom. Arya wiped sweat. Another weapon? Or a promise? The difference lies in hands that open the cage. No. Their conversation broke off as Karsi arrived from the city's lower terraces, her wolfskin cloak weary with road dust. I found Hardhome's ruins crawling with new ghosts, she said. Not ours, Ashai mages practicing sun summons. They left altars of obsidian marked with burning trees. Arya and Bran exchanged glances, proof of Vihara's order scaling every flank. Council convened. Jon, Sansa, Bran, Sam, Davos, Karsi, Arya, the Night King himself, each seated around a slab of reflective ice in Frostpyre's eclipse chamber. The iron sphere sat at room's center, steam curling where its heat met the chamber's breath. Sam adjusted spectacles fogged from transitions between climates. The runes resembled Harkonnen glyphs for starstone distillation, he said. That magic cracked the 12 rivers millennia ago. Whole valleys glassed. If this sphere ruptures... The Night King raised a hand, and cold settled into runes, dulling their glow. Fire caged inside iron is child of greed. It will burn womb or world alike. His voice drifted like snow across a lonely dune. Yet hope in hungers, grip will follow any light. Sansa spoke, firm. If arcane order offers summer without shackles, small folk may forsake our peace for their blaze. We cannot hide behind walls of ice and law, while others promise harvest gold. Jon nodded grimly. We must show the order, not through battle, but by proving balance less cruel than one eternal sun. Arya smirked. And if they refuse demonstration? Then, Bran said, turning pages become warnings. To answer the order's flaunted marvel, Frostpyre prepared a rite unseen since the children carved moons on weirwood trunks, the weave of seasons. In gleaming amphitheater, carved into a mountain's north face, Night King and Bran combined magics, green and white intertwining like vine around icicle. Jon's mirrors transported chosen witnesses, lords, masters, arcane envoys led by Vihara. Snow fell only within the arena circle. At a signal Bran pressed his palm to the ice floor. Roots of phantom weirwoods pulsed beneath crystal, and sprouts of fresh grass burst through, emerald amid white. The Night King lifted both arms. Wind roared, swirling snow up into spheres that melted midair, raining onto grass. Then he opened his clenched fist. Glow of captured pale memory spread warmth, just enough for flowers to bud, violet and shy. But within breaths, he curled fingers again, and gentle frost kissed petals, preserving them in perfect shimmer. A cycle of thaw and rest, writ small, life and sleep, alternating instead of tyrannizing. Vara watched, unreadable behind her mask. When the demonstration ended, cheers rose from onlookers. Beauty and restraint intertwined. She turned to Jon. A pretty truce between opposites. Yet the poor tire of patience. They crave warmth on bones. Her eyes flicked to sphere. Shatter cages. Feed villages for years. Jon gestured at preserved flowers. Feed them one endless summer and soil dies. Fields become deserts, rivers mere ghosts. A sudden tremor rolled underfoot, deep, violent. Cracks raced across amphitheater walls. Bran's gaze snapped northward. Someone opened a fault line in the glacier base. Carsey cursed. Sabotage. Screams sounded as chunks of ice sheared away, exposing caverns beneath. From their maws poured molten streams. Fiery not of lava but of orange liquid sun, leaking from vents the arcane order had drilled days prior. Their sphere was one vessel among many. Others slumbered unnoticed deep in the ice, triggered by remote sigils. The Night King's brow furrowed, rare alarm bleaching his composure. He leapt, literally burst apart into snow particles that whirled downward to plug fissures in instant walls of blue. Bran seized Arya's wrist. Their combined will sent phantom heart trees sprouting root webs that knitted chasms closed. Yet more vents cracked open. Above, Vihara spread her arms. Cloth of her cloak shimmered like forge heat. "Earth always bleeds," she intoned. Her riders on cliff edges ignited remote torches, each torch a key. Distant peaks erupted in pillars of flame. Sansa rallied guards to funnel panicked spectators to tunnel exits. Davos grabbed Sam's shoulder, hauling him from falling icicle spears. Jon sprinted toward Vihara, Ghost at his side. The masked woman whispered a command. Invisible wave flung Jon backward. Ghost skidded across ice, yelping but rising fury bright. Arya appeared behind Vara, blade primed for throat. Vara twitched. The blade met an unseen barrier, shattered like brittle sugar. Heat radiated outward, forcing Arya to roll aside. The Night King recoalesced before Vihara. Frost aura colliding with her heat haze. Steam shrieked between them. He spoke in tongue older than first men, a lesson of glaciers grinding mountains to dust. Vihara replied in cinder speech older still, sung by volcano hearts. Balance strained to snapping. Bran's mind soared through Weirwood network. He glimpsed runic pylons buried under miles of snow, each feeding detonation points. He sent ravens to Carsey, whose free folk still roamed border wilds, orders to sever glyph chains by any means. In ice caverns deeper still, Viridian and silent acolytes carved through tunnels, wielding cold to freeze burning vents before they'd fully breached. Each success dimmed flames overhead. But high on ridge, arcane acolytes conjured mirrored lenses harnessing true sun, directing focused beams that kept vents reigniting. Sansa commandeered archers, loosing dragon glass-tipped arrows to shatter lenses. Sparks cascaded. One stray beam bit through a tower. Stone hissed into slag, setting timber scaffolds ablaze. Chaos roared. In the maelstrom, Sam stumbled upon the iron sphere. Its rune glow pulsed unstable red, countdown quickening with rising ambient heat. Beside it, a young stable hand, wounded, wept. Sam's instincts roared louder than fear. He shoved parchment scrolls under the boy's head to cushion, and dragged both away. But the sphere's runes brightened, venting cracks spidered across its shell. Davos arrived, hacking through debris with war axe. "Sam," he barked, spotting risk. "Unless you mean us to meet the Seven now, run." Sam's gaze locked on glyphs. He remembered reading Dothraki treatises on starlore, references to nullifying sunstone by encasing it in void coal. "We need dragon glass," he gasped, "and Night King's frost. Call him." But the Night King battled Vihara, neither ceding. Jon rejoined, crossguard of Longclaw glowing where molten sparks kissed steel. He deflected Vihara's heat bursts, funneling them into stone, but she moved with serpentine grace. Arya slid beneath her again, this time with dual obsidian slivers. She feinted, luring Vihara's focus, while Jon pressed from front. For the first time, Vihara faltered, mask cracking hairline. Through fissure, Arya saw her eye. Not human, not holy. A pupil ringed by double irises burning copper. A blade slip found the mask's seam. Arya wrenched. Mask flew off. Gasps scattered. Vihara's face was scarless but not flesh. Sun-cast glass molded to mimic skin. Beneath clear surface, golden veins pulsed. She was vessel, not woman. a living crucible for fire sorcery. The Night King's frost poured across exposed visage, dimming veins to sluggish ember. Vara screamed, heat spikes lashing out to melt pillars 20 paces distant. But Jon held Longclaw two-handed, channeling inner steel, memories of every brother lost, every breath stolen by cold, and struck the glassy cheek. Crack. Dot. Hairline, but enough. Vara reeled. Arya kicked behind knee joint. She toppled. Night King exhaled, breath of winter burying her prone form in rime deeper than armor. Yet the iron sphere shrieked. Sam hurled himself toward the Night King. The core. Encapsulate, or it bursts. The Night King materialized at sphere and blink, ice shards swirling. He enveloped it, in cocoon of layered frost, thicker than city walls. Inside, runes flashed frantic, then spluttered as heat bled into abyssal cold. A muffled boom shook amphitheater. Frost cracked but held. Night King sighed, sound like avalanche at distance, and lowered sphere now blackened, inert. Fire vents above guttered, robbed of keystone pulse. Flames dwindled to smoke. Steam cleared, revealing ragged survivors ringed by destruction but alive. Vara's frozen prison remained at arena's center. Cracks mapping her glass flesh slowly spread. Jon eyed Night King. Is she dead? The ancient monarch shook his head. She dreams. Fire seldom dies, merely sleeps between breaths. Sansa surveyed ruin. Thousands witnessed this attack. The Order's promise of endless summer just scorched their faith. Davos wiped soot. And the Night King saved them with winter's blessing. Poetic. Bran's chair rolled forward, ravens fluttering above. Poetry alone won't root out all seeds. We must uncover who supplies these zealots. Karsi approached, carrying shattered lens fragments, etched with Braavosi shipping seals. Iron Bank again? Sam asked. She shook her head. False trail. These come from Korth. Merchants chasing profit in prophecy. Sansa closed eyes. Across seas, many will dream of wielding Vahara's light. We need an answer that isn't simply colder swords. Jon sheathed Longclaw. Then we turn enemies to allies before they pick sides. A council spanning oceans. Now. Night King considered. If heat and cold war within same flesh, he said, nodding to frozen Vihara, perhaps we forge vessel holding both in harmony. Teach Order their sunstone can pulse without devouring. Sam brightened. A regulated prism. Release warmth in increments matched to soil. Arya arched brow. You propose we share our craft with those who just tried to kill us. Bran answered, serene. Mercy lessens future knives, but guarded mercy. We bind agreements with runes both can sever should trust fracture. Davos chuckled darkly. A booby-trapped peace treaty. Suits these times. So began the labor called Dawn Sundering. Frostspire smiths and arcane artisans, now prisoner students, working side by side under watch of direwolves and ravens. They forged prismatic hearts combining crescent ice and starstone, each calibrated by Maester equations, and warded by weirwood sigils. Test crystals warmed a plot of barren soil, coaxing sprouts before cooling to let roots harden. Small folk across north sent letters marveling at cabbages that grew twice weight without withering. News sailed farther, to Dorne, to Pentos, to the Jade Sea. Curiosity outpaced suspicion. Merchants petitioned for rights to distribute balanced hearthstones. In exchange they delivered silk, obsidian wine, and bound volumes of lost Valyrian histories. But balance begets envy. The Iron Bank, its earlier intrigues thwarted, convened secret conclave. If Frostspire and her allies controlled both frost and warmth, their loans to warlords would sour. Stability starved interest. They turned to shadows narrower than coin. Faceless men. A contract of silence scribbled in invisible ink targeted the fulcrum. Bran Stark, whose green's ear gaze guided trust webs. Remove the witness, blind the accords. Meanwhile, seas churned. Reports reached Sam of krakens, trailing luminescent algae near Orkwood Islands, sign that underwater fissures gaped where sunstones had fallen during sabotage. If left untended, they could boil coastal waters, birthing hurricanes. Jon organized a voyage. Iron Island's longships escorted by Rhaegal overhead, crewed by free folk sailors and Frostpire storm riders. Arya insisted on boarding incognito, dagger reforged from pieces of her shattered blade. Sansa remained to oversee northern rebuild, while Night King traveled with Bran toward Isle of Faces, to commune with heart trees older than memory, seeking deeper root ways to stitch cracks in world's balance. Thus companions parted along lines of purpose, each step measured against looming unknowns. Night cloaked the bite as ironclads cut through oily swells, stars reflecting like scattered shards of blade. Arya perched on prow beside a hooded woman called Niha, who brewed ichor ink from squid to waterproof maps. Niha whispered of prophecies swirling in Ashai taverns, of a weeping calm, an era when neither snow nor sun would visit, only unending dusk, seeded by competing magics. Arya grunted. Prophecy is a liar's favorite spice. She flipped dagger, watching starlight skid along obsidian. We carve our meals. At midwatch, ghost bristled. Shapes rose from inky sea, figures clad in barnacle armor, eyes glowing cerulean. Not whites but merrowfolk seldom glimpsed above deepest trenches. Their leader carried coral trident that hummed like whale song. Jon confronted them upon ropenet gangway. We sail to seal wounds that bleed heat, he said. Merrow chief replied in bubbling Westerosi, waters scald where your fire priests lost their hearts. Fish flee, storms brood, aid us, or tides drown coasts both north and south. Arya whispered to Niha, even deep folk join this game. Jon agreed to alliance. Merrow would guide longships to fissures. Storm riders channel winds to close vents with froststone grout. Rhaegal's fire-tempered edges, fusing plugs like scar tissue on planetary scale. Days melded to nights of toil. Divers, human and Merrow, descended tethered to ropes of moonsilk. They placed prismatic hearts into vents, each heart balanced to radiate warmth inward toward magma, not outward. When sea settled to cool breathing again, whales breached in thanks. Spouts glittering under aurora. But beneath triumph, coiled threads of betrayal. On Isle of Faces, the faceless blade found its chance. Bran slept beneath ancient canopy, dreams exploring roots of men. As torches guttered, a silent form glided, face borrowed from a now-dead scribe. Yet before steel could strike, spiders of translucent ice scuttled from bark. Spinning web of hoarfrost about assassin's legs. The Night King stepped from shadows, gaze devoid of mercy. His frost seeped into killer's blood, freezing identity masks mid-shift. I too wear many faces, he whispered. But mine learned patience. He turned the assassin into crystal statue, leaving it standing as warning beneath weirwoods. Bran woke, eyes meeting the Night King's. Another page turns, Bran said. Then read next, Night King replied. What horizon sharpens? Bran's pupils clouded. Far south, dragons awaken beneath Volantis catacombs, stirred by rumors of balanced hearthstones. Every power in Essos eyes this land. Prepare. Night King inclined his head. If dawn and dusk struggle for mid-sky, we weave them into tapestry, or else suffocate beneath rift. Bran smiled sadly. That is the work of stories. Months flowed. The world bent but did not break. Balanced hearts spread across Westeros, each requiring both cold and warmth to function. Symbolic handshake between day and night, inscribed into daily life. Farmers learned to pulse warmth at dawn, frost at twilight, mimicking centuries of nature in compressed loops. Harvests doubled, famine receded. Craftsmen shaped crescent glass into art. Bards sang of Queen of Winter and Sunless King dancing on Mirror Bridge. Yet some nights children still woke crying that the Sunstone Devils would return. And on such nights, Jon would patrol ramparts of Winterfell, watching ghosts pad among flickering braziers, and remind himself that peace was a sword forever needing edge renewed. Atop Frostpyre, the Night King kept solitary vigil too, unblinking gaze on stars, listening to hum of hearts, living and remade, sharing one rhythm, fragile but holding. In a quiet hour when auroras draped the sky like cathedral glass, Jon ascended Frostpyre's spiral to speak with ancient ally. He found the Night King shaping miniature clouds between palms, teaching orphans how thunder is born, then hushed. Jon watched the lesson end, children scampering away, laughter echoing. Balance holds. For now, Jon said. Yes, Night King answered. But storms gather beyond our gaze. Jon exhaled. Together then, as we vowed. The Night King regarded him, something akin to warmth flickering behind moon eyes. Together. Their silhouettes stood against swirling lights, man of frost and man of scarred firecoat, two fulcrums upon which an age teetered. Below, kingdoms stirred in dreams of plenty. Beyond, empires calculated gains. Above, constellations inched along courses indifferent. Yet within that narrow space of mutual oath, possibility breathed. A slender, stubborn flame that refused to die, because it knew the cold that once desired death now chose instead to guard life's vulnerable spark. And so the story continued, turning page by patient page, while the world listened, holding its breath for the next whispered line. The summer-born night over Volantis was thick enough to taste, ripe fruit and river mud, and a coppery tang like fresh-drawn blood. From the high roof, where the black walls met the red temple's rear buttress, Arya Stark crouched astride a gargoyle skeined with bat droppings, and listened to the city breathe. Sailcloth snapped in the harbor. Perfume Bravos laughed beneath torchlit arches. Somewhere a red priestess extolled the fire god's gift of dawn. But beneath that bright veneer thrummed a deeper cadence, the hollow thunder of something vast stirring in catacombs older than the city's longest memory. Each vibration traveled the stones into Arya's bones, and she felt it the way a wolf feels a coming quake. Beside her, Niha unfolded a brass spyglass. She had traded her squid ink garb for slate silk robes, sigils of Null House embroidered at the hem to avoid staking allegiance. Heat plumes again, she whispered, angling the lens toward a cracked vent in the plaza below. Threads of steam fled the fissure, shimmering, coiling upward like serpents hungry for sky. Another inch, and the vault's roof might fall. Arya adjusted her daggers. We're late already. Bran says the hatchlings will break shell within days. 8 best. At worst, hours. Niha grimaced. Dragons birthed in darkness crave first breath of open flame. If it greets them without restraint, streets will char from the inside out. Arya looked to the horizon where faint auroras tinged dawn's lip, echoes from Frostpyre crossing half the world. She pictured Jon guiding prismatic hearts onto barge decks bound for this continent, hoping to temper dragonfire with measured frost. But storms slowed them, and Braavosi tariffs slowed them further. Here, within Volantis, merchants argued price while the city's foundations kindled beneath their feet. She stood. Time to open a side door. Niha folded the spyglass. Follow the turtles along the aqueduct. Passage drops into the sacrificial channels. Guards seldom patrol the ducts because they smell worse than a leech's backside. Arya grinned, despite her worry. Smells give direction. She swung off the gargoyle, fingers finding crevices. Her boots met cornice, then lattice window, then banner pulley. With every motion, she was 11 again, leaping cat's path across Winterfell roofs, ghosting where no one thought to glance. Niha descended another route, vanishing amid roof gardens. They would rendezvous beneath the street of the Silver Elephant, where sewer grates coughed vapor. There, Arya would slip into the veins of the city and crawl until she reached the great vault that once stored Elephant Warren treasures, now nursery for eggs the Arcane Order had stolen from distant shadow lands. Fire begat profit, profit begat indulgence. Indulgence threatened to undo every fragile covenant Jon and the Night King had stitched across seas. Far north in the Palace of Ice and Mirror, Bran's eyes rolled white. Ravennets flitted through chambers as his mind soared across continents. The Night King stood sentinel beside him, arms folded, gaze empty yet alert. Below the dais, Samuel Tarley read aloud figures from a new ledger. Grain flows from the reach purchased with hearthstones. Illness rates dropping after frost brewers chilled southern wells. Iron Bank loan demands declining as trade balanced itself. He paused, noticing frost feathering the Green's ear's armrest. Another vision? Sam asked softly. The Night King's voice drifted. Dragons quicken beneath Volantis. Sam swallowed. Arya's there, and Niha. But Joan's fleet was still 3 days out when the last raven departed. Menharau. Time shakes loose, the Night King murmured. Paths must tighten. He knelt so Bran's ear nearly touched his lips, an intimacy none had witnessed before. Whispered words unrolled, like hoarfrost across weirwood grooves. Bran's body shuddered, and all at once the ravens crowed and scattered. Sam stepped back, arms over ledgers. What did you do? Shared passageway, said the Night King, rising. Ice within dream may ride wind faster than oars. Bran's eyelids fluttered. When they opened, his pupils shimmered pale blue over green, momentary imprint of borrowed sight. I see the aqueduct, he said. I see Arya crawling among bones of elephants. I can show her where the hingestone lies. Sam blew out a breath. Then show her. He clutched his parchment as if the numbers upon it might anchor hope. Jon Snow's fleet labored under contrary currents. The merrowfolk, guided by sea charts carved in living coral, had led them through shallows, yes, but a viper coil of storms now barred the final leg to Volantis. Lightning split the towers of water-pounding hulls. Rain hammered decks like hurled nails. On the flagship deck, Jon wrestled a rope to keep a mast from shearing. Rhaegal swooped overhead, wings buffeted. Davos staggered beside him, beard streaming salt water. Can't push through, my lord. Rudder snaps, we sink. Jon squinted at black sky. Storm feels wrong, too sudden, centered on our course. A Marrow scout surfaced, eyes luminous. Currents reverse. Something drinks tide away from city. Heat draws sea to boil. Jon's stomach dropped. Volantis overheating, pulling storms inland. Then we cannot wait for calm. Rhaegal must carry the first hearts ahead. Davos wiped water. A dragon alone? Jon signaled to the deckhands. They hauled prismatic crates, each heart humming cold, and loaded them into leather nets. He climbed the mast ladder to Rhaegal's saddle, Ghost leaping after with practiced balance. Storm gusts nearly flung him clear. Lightning flashed off Longclaw. He strapped nets beneath scales. Rhaegal rumbled displeasure at weight. Jon placed a hand on Emerald neck, recalling days atop snowy ridges. Fly, old friend. Find Arya. Find the heat and share breath. Menno. Rhaegal leapt, hurricane winds snatching him skyward. Lightning laced clouds around them, yet dragonfire blossomed from his jaws, carving tunnels of hot light for wings to slip through. Behind, the fleet hove to, battered but afloat. Davos watched until Emerald's spark disappeared into bruised heavens. Deep within Volantis, Vihara's prison of rime had been shipped in secret across straits, purchased by fire worshippers who thought to convert her into reliquary. But cracks spidered. The glass flesh within remembered old rage. Heat leaked, thawed, and the woman who was not woman revived. She stalked quarters of red priesthood, gathering disciples whose faith blurred truth until they accepted her as promised dawn bride of their apocalypse. They wove sigils around Dragon Vault, intending to greet newborn worms with sunstone hearts, never realizing those hearts, unbalanced, could rend continent. Vara traced rune geometry across the shell of the largest egg, singing in cinder tongue. The egg pulsed feverish orange. Stone scales softened to leather. A nose horn punched through, dripping molten yolk. Siblings writhed, restless. In the gloom, priests rang silver bells, ignoring sweat that boiled atop skin. Above, Arya eased along sewer causeway guided by Bran's phantom whisper. The stench was indescribable. Fermented blood, rat musk, the sour hum of rotting magic. She reached a cul-de-sac where wide flagstones formed a pattern of turtles and lilies. Bran's voice slid into her thoughts like breeze through threads. Press the eye of the third turtle. Hinge releases. She did. Stone settled half an inch. The wall rotated on noiseless bearings, revealing stairs spiraling down amid phosphorescent fungi. Heat wafted in heavy pulses, each throb like a giant heart. She descended, counting breaths. At landing's end, a bronze door hung ajar, hinges sagging under waves of radiance. Beyond, the vault. Eggs. 3 of them, nested in obsidian troughs above braziers. Vara circled them with priests. The eldest egg shook, cracks gleaming. Arya surveyed exits. 1 arch behind altars, 1 grate overhead. She eyed the hangings, a ring of oil lamps strung together, wicks nearly kissing ceiling drapes. 1 spark to drapery. Smoke would choke heat, slow eggs. But priests might panic, slay captives. She spotted no hostages, only zealots. She drew breath, gripped dragon glass sliver, and stepped into torchlight. Leave the shells, she said, voice echoing. Vara's head turned, mask gone, glass visage gleamed ember. Little wolf returns. She lifted hand, shifting sigil lines. Flames danced along egg cracks. You cannot halt dawn. Arya advanced, not halting, guiding. Fire needs cold to find shape. Priests hissed, drawing hooked knives. Arya flung her sliver. It took 1 man and throat. She rolled beneath sweeping blade, hamstrung second. Third she disarmed, reversed knife into spine. Her body became stream around stone, each move a stanza of water dance. Vara raised both palms. Heat concussed outward. Arya felt skin blister. She dove behind altar as stone blistered and popped. In that instant, the eldest egg burst. Baby dragon, half covered in viscous gold. Its scream drowned all else. Vault trembled. Steam geysered, splitting braziers. Baby flailed, blind and wrathful. Its exhalations seared a line across floor, turning marble to glass. Priests scattered. Vara knelt, chanting. Heat waves coalesced around her, forging unseen leash that yanked hatchling's neck toward her grasp. Arya hauled herself upright, chest aflame with pain. She scanned for weapons. Shelves lined wall. Vials of starstone dust, coils of bronze chain smoldering. Among them, an odd item. A cylindrical case of crescent glass, frost swirling inside, a gift once traded in secret to Volantine dignitary. She seized it. The glass felt colder than Frostspire nights. Vara forced hatchling's wavering gaze toward her. The creature's throat sacs glowed. She intended to imprint obedience in first moments. Arya wrenched case lid. A plume of hormist erupted, sweeping with preternatural hunger, blanketing dragon and Vihara alike. Steam roared as extremes collided. Hatchling shrieked sharper. Vihara's glass flesh frosted over. The dragon thrashed, tail smashed a brazier into second egg. Sparks cascaded across shell. The vault now pulsed between freezing and boiling. Arya sprinted to central plinth, yanked frost-laden cables from case, wrapping them around half-molten egg to absorb heat. Bran's voice urged calm, guiding her hands to feed cable ends into trough of water turned instantly to slush. Stone overhead groaned. Niha, arriving through grate, dropped a rope ladder. She tossed 2 small hearts, prismatic prototypes. Place at vent mouths, she shouted. Arya shoved one into black vent near ceiling. It adhered, exhaling cool breath that silenced the roar. She hurled second toward cracked brazier base. Frost blossomed outward, chilling flame. Hatchling still writhed, but frenzy tempered. It coughed smoke, eyes uncertain. Without Vihara's heat, tether it floundered. Instincts split between attack and retreat. Arya approached slowly, murmuring half-remembered words Valyrians used to calm colts. She extended bloodied palm. The dragon sniffed burnt flesh, flicked tongue forked and tender. Above, a thunderclap rattled foundations. regal tearing through vaults capped vent, nets of prismatic hearts clanging. Jon rode saddle, long claw, drawn taut. The elder dragon screamed challenge at Newborn. Newborn skittered behind Arya, peering from her hip like panicked dog. Jon landed, dismounted, amid crumbled dais. His eyes widened on Arya alive amid ruin, a hatchling behind her. Relief mixed with horror. One hatched. Others close. Arya rasped. But balanced hearts hold heat. She gestured to vents where crystals pulsed, calm azure. Jon set Ghost to guard corridor. He and Arya threaded frost chains around second egg, stalling cracks. Niha distributed more hearts, placing them strategic. For hours they wrestled with temperaments of stone and flame, coaxing each hatchling into measured emergence. By dawn, 3 dragons, all small, wings still translucent, dozed in ring of gentle warmth. Vara lay encased to chest in crescent ice. Her glass face fissured. Beneath, true flesh glimpsed, brown skin marred by brands. Arya knelt. Who forged you? Vara's eyes fluttered. Pain, confusion. She whispered, order promised to burn chains. A tear, liquid gold, slipped. I became chain. Jon's expression softened. He signaled Niha to bring water. Balance can free you, he said. But you must relinquish the blaze. She closed eyes, weary. Frost spread up neck, sealing confession in hush. She slept within ice, not as prison but cocoon awaiting slow thaw. Days later, Plaza of Yellow Market brimmed with citizens expecting doom yet beholding marvel. 3 infant dragons perched on Rhaegal's outstretched wings, while Night King and Red Temple's high priest shared dais. Hushed thousands felt desert dust swirl with northern snow breathed from hidden ducts, each flake evaporating before touching heated cobblestones, leaving only a crisp scent of cedar. The high priest addressed crowd. Fire alone blinds, ice alone numbs, but woven they temper. He lifted a prismatic heart, the size of a child's skull, formed by joint craft. Sunlight refracted through its facets, casting floral patterns on faces around. Henceforth, Volantis will anchor twin embassies, one pillar of dawn, one pillar of dusk, where engineers of frost and flame refine harmony. Let this be the Axis Concord. Cheers rippled. Skeptical, but enthralled. In balconies, merchants already calculated tariffs on tempered warmth. Children pointed at hatchlings chirping for fish. Peace might hold another season. Sansa's Raven arrived next morning, citing Riverland's agreement to host Second Heart Forge. Dornish envoys requested desert frost towers to Dew Farm. Step by step, patchwork of trust widened. Yet across the summer sea, sell sails under black shipyards whispered of faceless contracts gone unpaid, of iron bank vaults shifting coin into deeper shadows. In leaseholds of Korth, sages brewed stormglass, attuned not to sun or snow, but void between stars. And far beyond, on Poison Sea's rim, a sorcerer of Leng mapped convergences, scribbling how hearts that balance might fracture should an unseen third pole tilt, neither fire nor ice, but something older, hungry for psalm silence. In Frostspire's highest observatory, Jon and the Night King watched constellations wheel. Bran slumbered in rocking chair, his dreams busy bridging worlds. The Night King extended a finger to a thin pane of ice. Within it, twinkled miniature model of continents where pulses of red and blue glimmered, where hearts had been placed. A new spark, violet, flickered off map's edge. Another force, Jon said quietly. Shadow of Lost Dawn, Night King replied. We will learn its rhyme. Jon folded arms. I once thought winning meant ending threat. Now I see winning is listening to each new tremor. Bah. Night King looked at him, pale eyes reflecting stars. Night listens by nature, day must learn. That is why we stand together. A hush settled. Below, children's laughter drifted where orphanage domes radiated gentle warmth from hearts. Above, auroras threaded scarlet with cerulean. Ghost slept with the hatchlings in courtyard, snow on fur glittering in hearthlight. John reached to window, touching cold surface. Whatever rises, we answer. The Night King mirrored gesture, his frost meeting Joan's warmth. Between palms, glass fogged then cleared, revealing horizon where first rays of true dawn kissed the world. Two shadows, one crowned with ice, one cloaked in fur, stood side by side inside that reflection, guardians of a teetering balance neither could keep alone. Behind them stretched a path of chapters yet unwritten. Storms and revolutions, betrayals and unlikely redemptions. For now, though, there was breath, and there was a fragile peace pulsing in time with the twin hearts of frost and flame. Dawn seeped like watered wine across Frostspire's mirrored parapets when Vihara heard her name for the first time in days. She lay in a high chamber whose walls breathed cool vapor. Slow thaw, easing glassy skin back to flesh. A single brazier of snowfire warmed without melting and painted her cheeks in violet, half-glow. At the door stood Samuel Tarley, spectacles misting, clutching a stack of vellum. He cleared his throat as though announcing court, then remembered this woman had once tried to burn the world awake. "I thought," he began, voice wobbling, "you might like to see what comes of balance." He offered a ledger, pages alive with trade tallies and grain yields, sketches of frost veins erected atop Volantine granaries. At first Vihara's bandaged fingers trembled too sharply to lift the bundle. Sam knelt and turned pages for her. Numbers piled like bricks, each column testimony that cold married to warmth could feed more mouths than flame alone. Vihara's eyes, brown now, the molten glow subsided, flicked across the sums, widening to the shape of possibility she had never considered. Tears, this time clear, lined her lashes. Chains break slower than fires burn, Sam said gently. But they break surer. She raised one hand. He flinched, memory of heat wave in his bones. Yet the hand only touched his, cool as dawnstone. "What do I do now?" she whispered. "Live," he said, "and teach us what you know of sunstone, so none wield it unhinged again." Across the shivering sea, the sky was the color of spilled ink, and in its depths a comet new to charts burned violet, tail dragging threads like webbed claws. It had appeared 3 nights earlier, first sighted by maesters on the Hightower's glass platform. Where most comets rode east to west, this drifted northward, slow, deliberate. Bran tasted its arrival as a sulfur note in every green dream. The weave thrummed with a third tone, neither warmth nor chill but hungry hush. He summoned John and the Night King to the Godswood behind Winterfell's rebuilt keep, where heart-tree roots coiled like white serpents through fresh-turned loam. Bran's chair jolted as ravens alighted on its arms. When the first men carved their faces into these trees, he said, voice thin but steady, they feared winter, and they feared fire, yet most of all they feared the quiet between. The tales call it Nahal, the star-starved breath that gnaws songs to dust. It swallows balance. John looked up at the violet comet barely visible in dawn's pallor. "A third war?" "Not war," Bran murmured. "A forgetting." The Night King rested frost-pale fingers on bark and closed his eyes. Frost flowers spidered across the trunk, then receded. "I sense a drawing inward, like tide before void." He turned to John. "Ice and fire have found accord. We must court shadow now." Beyond Ashai by the shadow, a fortress knelt atop basalt cliffs, windowless spires carved from a single square mile of black glass. Inside, chanting scholars in robes, the color of bruised dusk, etched star diagrams onto slates of stormglass. At the center of their vaulted observatory floated an orb, much like the arcane sunstones but darker. Deep amethyst glimmering with motes that blinked in and out like dying stars. Each time the violet comet crawled a degree across the sky, those motes brightened, and the hollow at the sphere's core widened. High Scholar Rhaenys of Leng paced the dais, his 6 pupils dilating to plate size as he listened to distant harmonies. Frost crafts, hearthstones, living hearts of dragons, noises of a world refusing emptiness. He dipped quill in shadow ink and wrote a single line in Valyrian runes. Unmake the cord. Then he dispatched whispers by Shadowcat and Glass Candle. Agents already seated in Braavos, Qarth, Gulltown, even Old Town's cryptic undercellars, all awaiting the phrase. During Frostspire's weekly night market, where stalls of glimmering ice petals stood beside braziers of blue flame tea, Arya bargained for wyvern hide gauntlets when a boy sprinted up, hair ice-dusted, eyes wild. "Lady Stark," he gasped, thrusting a folded parchment. Bird fell from sky aflame. Only this left unburnt. She slipped coin into his palm and unfolded the scrap. Ink still smoked around edges, yet the Valyrian runes were clear enough. Unmake the cord. Her breath caught. The phrase twined around her memory, a half-heard echo from nights spent stalking red priests. She tucked note into glove and vanished into crowd. She found Jon and Sansa together above Mirror Bridge, discussing grain tariffs. Wordlessly, she pressed the paper into Jon's hand. He traced letters, face hardening. Any idea who sent? "A comet's message," she said. "I'll hunt the courier's trail." Jon squeezed her shoulder. "Take Ghost. If this is prelude, I need your blade on silent roads." "Then?" "Yeah." Sansa's gaze drifted to Comet's faint smear. "I will tighten gates, double watch." But rumors spread faster than ravens. People already whisper the skies wound is a curse for hubris. Jon nodded grimly. Fear is Nahal's first servant. At Old Town, Maester Corran, newly freed from Covenant chains, guided Melora Hightower through sealed catacombs beneath the citadel. They traced chalk sigils on floor slabs, shutting out apprentices who buzzed over the comet. Corran unlocked a rusted chest no hand had opened since before the doom. Within lay fragments of greasy black stone and a single knucklebone carved with 3 faces. Smiling, grimacing, blank. He placed bone on table. It vibrated, aligning itself toward north-northwest, pointing at Frostspire. Melora's breath misted though air was warm. Dragon glass never chilled like that before. Corran scribbled angles. If each face marks a force. Smile for flame, grimace for ice, blank for void. Then the needle shows void hungry for the fulcrum of balance we built. Meaning, Frostspire holds what it wants. Or what it must erase. Mercenaries paid in Iron Bank coin, the same who'd lost Hardhome and White Harbor plots, assembled in Qohor, their captain a Myrish woman called Kalira Vesper. She unfurled maps stitched from silken spider thread, depicting Frostspire's underveins. Her target, the Mirror Heart, an engine of fused dragon glass and ice that regulated every prismatic node. "Steel or shatter it," she promised, "and night's gifts freeze entire north or collapse to silent void." Payment. Debt erasure for 3 generations and a chest of shadow gold whose ingots drank torchlight. As they readied black powder bombs and chain hooks of folded steel, a tall bravo on loan from Braavos listened from shadows. His coin purse carried sigil of faceless guild, instructions etched on metal sliver. Observe only. He melted into crowd, face folding into another. Jon summoned council in Winterfell's rebuilt hall. Snow fell outside though it was midsummer, the world's pulse slipping. Around the weirwood root table gathered Davos, Sam, Arya, fresh returned, Karsi, Niha, Vihara, flanked by Frostguard. And by Glow Orb, the Night King's projection shimmering pale. Sam opened with the bones alignment, Melora's findings. Void seeks center of balance. If Mirror Heart fails, Shadow wins. Karsi swore in free folk tongue. Niha unfurled fresh intel. Qohor sells words, moving through narrow valleys, south of Skagos, disguised as tin traders. Arya confirmed, blade-tapping pattern on wood. I slipped among their scouts. They carry explosives dusted with starstone powder. One spark and ice turns brittle. Bounty. Varys' voice shook, yet held conviction. Sunstone powder, if inverted with liquid night, mined in Leng, births a cold fire that eats both heat and frost. They mean to collapse the lattice. The Night King's image flickered. Heart cannot be removed, sings with the world's breath. But we can weave counternotes. He looked at Bran beyond table. Bran's eyes widened, followed Comet's path. I travel to Sorrow Isle, Bran murmured, where children of forest left caches of arc sap that binds fissures between realms. With it we may armor Mirror Heart. Jon straightened. You'll need escort. Davos will sail you with Karsi and Niha. Arya and I guard Frostspire. Vihara teach Sam how to cool Starstone with Prism Frost. We may need dampeners. Sansa stepped from Arch. And I will hold lords steady. Every rumor of haunted Comet shakes our courts. The council broke with silent oaths. Outside, flakes hissed against torch iron, vapor rising like spirits freed. The voyage to Sorrow Isle skirted seas where krakens had once sung of warmth. Davos captained the Black Beth II, sails sewn with mirrored thread that confused shadows. Karsi watched horizon. Niha studied currents, muttering about tides reversing. Bran lay below deck in cradle sling, eyes ranged across dream routes guiding them. On the fourth night, the sea fell unnaturally still. Masts creaked. Sails sagged. Fog rolled thick enough to dull lanterns. From within fog rose silhouettes. Ships built of black crystal, hulls silent. No oars, no crew visible, yet they glided, drawing circles like sharks, scenting blood. Davos ordered weapons. Karsi notched moonsteel arrow. Niha poured pearl dust into spinning lens, casting thin beam. The beam struck nearest ship. Fog thinned to reveal deck crewed by statues. Men carved from fused salt, faces contorted mid-scream. Bran's voice drifted up from hold. Do not fire. Those are echoes of lost voyages, trapped between tides by Nagal's hunger. The statues turned hollow eyes. One raised hand, palm etched with same runes as Comet's trail. A pulse of violet raced across water, striking Betha's bow. Wood groaned, freezing from inside. Karsi loosed arrow. It shattered salt arm. Statues crumbled, releasing wind that smelled of burial. The spectral fleet dissolved as quickly as it came. Fog peeled away. Yet bow timber still cracked with creeping frost line. Niha knelt, pressed prism stone to wood. Frost receded. She exhaled. World boundaries thinning. If we tarry, we'll sail on nightmares. They reached Sorrow Isle at twilight. Ash trees bled black resin. Ground sizzled underfoot. Deep within ruin of old Green's Ear outpost, Bran guided them to vault, choked with vines. There pulsed arc sap, luminous silver threading amber pockets along trunk veins. Bran wove limb through root, channeling weirwood memory. Sap oozed into empty dragonglass jars Niha held. Each jar flickered with starlight. When they emerged, silhouettes watched from treeline. Ghasts tall and eyeless, skin mottled violet. They parted soundlessly to let travelers pass, but their presence chilled lungs as if each breath risked erasure. Niha whispered prayer to 36 tidal spirits. Karsi tapped axe half to keep courage. A raven awaited on mast when they rowed back. Message from Sansa. Mercenaries breached gift. Arya wounded. Mirror Heart, under siege. Frostspire's shining terraces echoed with clashes of steel and bursts of starstone powder that popped like superheated hail. Arya ducked behind Frostarch, blood-streaking scalp. Ghost lunged at Saboteur, armed with powder satchel. Explosion sent both flying, but Ghost rose, white coat charred, growling to fight again. Jon stood on Mirror Bridge, holding line with 24 mixed guards. Northerners, giants, ice-forged companions. Kalira Vesper's mercenaries swarmed like ants, grappling hooks biting ice wall. Behind first waves, engineers assembled brass cannon tubes engraved with empty circles. Void glyphs. A blast cracked parapet. Chunk of mirror glass fell, shattering into raised courtyard. Prismatic beams flickered unstable. Within central tower, Mirror Heart's hum pitched higher, fighting interference. Jon slashed through attacker, scanned for Arya. She vaulted over broken balustrade, reached him breathing hard. Bombs planted beneath causeway, powder laced with Leng void crystals. He wiped soot. We hold until Bran arrives with sap. Night King descended spiral of snowflame, every step birthing thunderclap frost that slowed mercenaries' advance. But for every foe frozen another seized starstone blasters and fired shards that burned cold black holes in ice barriers. Balance teetered. One side could not kill without risking void surge. The other sought collapse. High above, violet comet blazed brighter, casting weird shadows. Kalira stood atop captured turret, aiming void cannon at Mirrorheart. Her grin glimmered sickly. She fired. Beam of darkness lanced toward core. At same instant, Vihara emerged from inner hall, clutching improvised reflector of crescent glass. She jumped between, angling shield. Beam struck, split into twin streams ricocheting into sky where it fizzled. Kalira cursed, recharged. Vihara's arms shook, glass spidered cracks. Jon yelled but too far. Arya dashed. Slid under bolts. Reached Vihara as second shot fired. Both tumbled aside, beam grazing shield, shattering it. Shards rained luminous frost. Vihara gasped. Half unconscious. Arya dragged her behind column. Night King saw Kalira prepare third shot aimed at him. He raised palms, summoned sheet of living snow. Beam met snow, devoured it, still punched through, grazing his shoulder. Frost armor splintered, black scorch seeping. Mirrorheart wailed, pitches colliding like clanging bells. Cracks spread across its shell. Thunder roared overhead. Rhaegal diving T. Behind him, the Betha fleet arrived. Sap jars strapped in nets. Bran, eyes blazing green-blue, rode Dragonek. Davos, Karsi, Niha followed on rope ladders. Rhaegal smashed through smoke, landing by tower. Bran extended arm. Sap jars floated, orbiting Heart. Night King turned, fused frost with sap into ribbons that wound crack, sealing. Heart's tone stabilized, emitting concentric rings that pushed void cannon recoil toward attackers. Kalira's third shot collapsed midair, feedback exploding cannon. She fell screaming into courtyard. Mercenaries faltered. Arya Jon, Karsi led countercharge, disarming survivors. Ghost herded them to lower terraces where Niha contained void powder bombs in prism cages. Within an hour, Frostspire secured. Mirrorheart thrumming steady. Night King circled Heart, layering final arc sap filaments. Bond sealed. Void touch will splinter before reaching core again. Bran zagged in Karsi's support. But Comet's path remains. It feeds on failed cord. Jon wiped blade. Then we follow path to its nest. Captured Kalira revealed under Truth Frost that she answered to Rhaenys of Leng, who awaited word that Frostspire fell, preparing to open Feast of Forgetting by aligning Comet with Shadow Orb. Location: Fortress at Kadath's Rim, west of Ashai's Gloom Sea. Time: next moon crossing. Council gathered. Night King, Bran, Jon, Arya, Sansa remotely. Vihara now ally, Niha, Sam, Davos, Karsi. Strategy formed. Send delegation, ice, fire, and balanced hearts, to confront Rhaenys, sever orb comet link. Failure meant cord unmade. Existence slipping into permanent twilight, where memory erodes. Rhaegal would bear Night King and Bran. Jon, Arya, Karsi on second dragon. One hatchling matured enough to ride, named Dawnflame, its breath a blend of cold and heat. Davos with Niha pilot, prism engine ship along coast, to hit Fortress Seagate. Sam and Vihara guard Frostspire with sap reservoirs. Sansa blessed them. For every child sleeping safe, come home. They departed, under lanterns, blending blue and amber. Violet comet loomed large, tail like scythe. Flight across bone mountains tasted of rust wind. At Kadath's Rim basalt cliffs, jagged into churning black waters. Fortress windows glowed violet. As dragons circled, ballistae of shadowglass launched. Rhaegal dodged. Dawnflame spat swirl breath at froze bolts, Then burst Frost shell with spark core, shattering projectiles mid-air. Night King and Bran dismounted on parapet, swords of mutual design. Blade half Valyrian steel, half ice crystal. Jon's team landed lower courtyard. Carsey hacked gate. Arya danced through shadows, knives finding gaps in Lingard's scaled cloaks. Inside, corridors pulsed mauve. Symbols bled across walls like living ink. At Central Observatory, Rhaenys stood beneath levitating orb, comet's light funneling into it through open roof aperture. He wore circlet of starbone, eyes masked by moth-white membranes. He raised six-fingered hands. Welcome, keepers of dying song. Witness unmaking. Ben? Night King strode forward, frost radiating. Song adapts. He thrust chilled air. Rhaenys countered with vacuum pulse that sucked breath. Bran anchored will to tree spirits. Roots erupted from basalt floor, gripping Rhaenys' ankles. Jon leapt, long claw flashing. Beam of shadow parried, metal screaming. Arya flanked, but orb discharged spiral wave. Memory warped. She saw Ned die again, faltered. Carsey tackled her aside. Bran opened jar. Arc sap streamed upward, weaving cage around orb. Violet flames licked cage, squealing. Night King exhaled winter deeper than glacier core. Bran summoned heart tree warmth. Dual currents funneled through sap into orb, forcing comet light to refract into spectrum. Orb cracked spiderweb. Rhaenys screamed, shredding roots with impossible strength. He lunged, but dawn flame crashed through wall. Roar kaleidoscopic. Dragon's hybrid breath struck orb. Fracture widened. Rhaenys shrieked. Moth membranes rupturing, revealing eyes void black dottle. He dove to merge with orb. Night King intercepted. Blade piercing, starbone circlet. Frost and steel met shadow. Explosion of silence. Wave rippled outward, extinguishing torches across fortress. Halting ballistae. Comet above flickered. Tail unraveled into sparks that rained soft violet, fading before landfall. Orb imploded inward, sealing Rhaenys within shard that hissed, then cooled to inert onyx. Bran slumped. Night King steadied him. Arya rose, memories intact. Jon approached shard, long claw ready. Night King shook head. Let it sleep, buried where roots watch. They departed as fortress groaned. Carved supports crumbling, now energy siphon severed. Dragons ferried them out while Davos ship volleyed prism charges, collapsing sea gate, flooding halls. Kadath fortress sank, swallowed by ocean. Back at Frostspire, Auroras brightened turquoise. Mirror Heart thrummed harmonious triad. No discord. The comet, now pale, drifted into outer dark. Sam recorded in ledgers. Trade stable. Harvest thriving. Vahara oversaw. Forge shaping new hearts, attune triple. Ice, fire, and hush. To ensure void found resonance, not vacuum. Children released lanterns cut as 3 interlocked rings, chasing each other up twilight sky. In Winterfell's Godswood, Jon and Night King stood before Heart Tree. Snowflakes melted on bark, but left silver marks. Jon spoke first. We fought to keep balance. Is peace more than lull between threats? Night King looked skyward where no ominous light shone. Peace is rhythm. Discord inevitable, but melody endures when many instruments answer. He placed frost palm on Jon's shoulder. Guardians listen. That is enough. From rampart area watched hatchlings glide, dawn flame teaching siblings currents. Ghost at her side. Tail sweeping snow. She breathed crisp air scented with cedar and dragon smoke, and thought of songs sung long after swords rusted. Somewhere beyond horizon new tales sharpened, but for this heartbeat, the realm hummed with hard-won equilibrium. Below, Bran wheeled along courtyard, ravens tracing lazy spiral. He smiled as lanterns rose, blue, red, violet interlaced threads climbing into deepening dusk. And high overhead, empty sky accepted them without omen. Because for the first time in living memory, the night was simply night, and the morning yet to come would belong to every heart, warm, cold, and all uncharted tones between. The morning after the comet's violet embers finally bled from the sky, a brittle hush settled over the north, as though the land itself strained to hear whether the cosmos still breathed. Frostspire's mirrors shone in the bleak light like a clutch of newborn moons, and their reflections painted half of Winterfell's freshly laid stones in rippling spectra that looked like wounds and healings at once. Jon Snow woke beneath that dawn feeling older than the years he had carried, each scar along his ribs humming questions for which experience held no scale. He had slept the sleep of men who have taken off armor, only to discover the weight still tethered to their bones. Ghost stirred first, always did, nose twitching toward eastern parapets, where Night King's silhouette cut a solitary line against drifting snow. Jon rose, ignoring the dull ache in thighs that came of riding Dawnflame bareback across half a world, and pulled a cloak of mended bear fur over shoulders, still tacky with salves, that Arya insisted smelled of myrrh and regret. He padded across corridors half empty of guard posts, for most soldiers still slumbered after days of war and brittle victory, and climbed to the ramparts just as the sun's first shaft caught on the Frost Monarch's profile. Night King did not flinch at footsteps. Perhaps he tasted them in the wind. His pale eyes held the horizon, where caravan lines crawled like ants along the King's Road. New settlers, merchants, and pilgrims, eager to behold the miracle city that straddled cold and warm. In the valley below, contrails of steam curled from prismatic hearth towers, distributing balanced currents to fields that would soon sprout barley despite the snow, still swirling from a sky that had forgotten midnight belonged to winter. "They come hungry," Jon said, voice wrapped in condensation. "Hungry and curious," the Night King answered, timbre soft as frost upon glass. "But curiosity can sharpen to fear with dawn's first misstep." Jon nodded. He had felt it, too, that brittle thread between awe and dread. "I ride south to greet them. Arya's scouts report talk of splinter orders, some calling themselves the Nightless Faith, preachers claiming the Triple Accord stole daylight from children." The Night King tilted his head. "A truth is seldom the shape it begins. Continue to shape it." "Now." Below, a horn quavered from the first caravan's outrider, a note of both greeting and guarded caution. Jon ran fingers through hair still matted from dragon wind, and took the short stair that spiraled to Winterfell's west gate, where Sansa waited in a cloak lined with fox fur dyed a muted azure, a color that, according to the weavers, evoked neither icy dominion nor fiery zeal, but the thin band of sky perched between dusk and dawn. She offered a crooked half-smile that owed more to fatigue than amusement. "You'll do better than most holding a crowd," she said, fastening a bone-handled dagger beneath her mantle. "But keep Ghost at heel. Small folk haven't all forgiven the memory of white wolves pacing the enemy lines." "He guards more than me," Jon replied, scratching the wolf's shaggy neck. And because formality could be its own bridge, he kissed her cheek and stepped beyond the gate as the first wagons ground into view, iron rim wheels creaking like old sea doors. Merchants rode at the front, Valyrian sailors bearing peppermint leaf crates, Dothraki horse brothers leading reluctant geldings, bridled with ribbons of turquoise. Behind them trudged barefooted pilgrims, carrying idols carved anew. Not of the seven, not of Arlor, nor of old gods, but of 3 interlocked circles cut from driftwood and soldered with frost powder, so they forever glimmered faintly. Each pilgrim seemed to mutter their own theory of what the rings meant: unity, contradiction, survival, but all treated the symbol as if any touch might singe or freeze them. Jon raised a gloved hand. "Welcome to Winterfell, seat of accord and bridge to Frostspire. You seek audience, trade, perhaps guidance. But first you seek roofs and fires after long roads. Those we have aplenty." A murmur rippled. Some bowed. Others stared at the crownless king who wore no circlet save the silver threads of his hair. From a wagon hopped a girl no older than 10. Her cheeks flushed rose. She knelt in snow, offering a sprig of dried Nemeria blossom. "You saved my da from coughing sickness," she piped. The frost brewers cooled his lungs. John knelt too, accepting the flower as though it were Myrish silk. "Your da saved himself by courageously swallowing medicine brewed by Samuel Tarley's hands. We only lent winter's breath." She grinned. The crowd's tension slackened. Voices rose. Small tributes of cider, bolts of cloth. Even a lute passed forward in hopes a bard would sing songs of the new peace. Yet, from the far end of line, subtle discord spread. A preacher robed in pale saffron turned aside, her forefinger tracing circles on her breast. She whispered to companions, who eyed Ghost and the frost parapets above. John took measure and flagged Arya's shadow scouts perched in battlements. The watchers melted deeper into crenelles, eyes following. Inside the keep, Viara joined Sam in the refurbished solar where donations of starstone and crescent glass lay sorted into shelves, each tagged for research. Her gait remained tentative, a lifetime of flame still fighting frost along tendons. The transformation had left her less a weapon, more a tuning fork vibrating at two distinct frequencies. She ran nails, now dull, no longer molten, across a slab of sunstone etched with void-neutralizing runes. "We will make Amphorae next," she said softly, voice a reed trembling. Liquid shadows from Leng contain secrets of weightlessness. If we house them in hearts balanced thrice, skyships might rise. Sam looked up from ledger, quill catching candlelight. "Perhaps after the harvest," he said, smiling. "Last thing we need is lords panicked by flying Amphorae." Vihara's own smile flickered like dawn star behind clouds. "Perhaps something gentler then. Lanterns that change color to warn of imbalance. Blue for chill excess, red for heat, violet for hush. People trust what they can see." She regarded her reflection in the glass, eyes now nut brown flecked with amber, free of the eternal ember glow. "I once forced them to kneel with terror. Now you guide them with caution," Sam answered. "Change begins in small beats." Outside, John ushered caravans into courtyard, where Sansa arranged cask stands of spiced oat ale, and Stark maids handed out hand-warmers forged from leftover prism hearts. The crowd's curious hush turned to low talk. Of stall placements, of where one might set up spice racks come morning. Yet not all tongues wagged of commerce. In a corner by the smithy, Arya intercepted the saffron preacher. Beneath the robe's hood, a gaunt woman, eyes like chipped slat, bore scars burned in the shape of crescent moons. Her voice hissed like lamp wicks starved. "Your brother preaches chains disguised as bridges," she said. "Triple ring is lie. Ice and flame cannot share cradle. Flood follows such union, and memory rots. We pray for nightless dawn." Arya's eyebrow twitched. "You did not walk weeks just to scold. What is it you truly want?" The woman's lips peeled. "To witness fall of spire when hush reclaims stolen sound. Our seers read the comet's afterglow. Next shall rise." "And where are these seers?" "In walls of Eshai, kneeling before empty thrones. But their eyes feed mine." She touched her bib where 3 tiers of obsidian dangled. "Mark us. Balance is cage, not freedom." Arya contemplated introducing the woman to Nymerian steel, but around them children laughed at Ghost's attempts to chase a scruffy cat, and the moment for unseen blades passed. Instead, she took the preacher's wrist gently. "I once believed names wrote destiny," she said. "But even those who wore my death list changed before the end. If hush covets our harmony, it will learn that memory prefers writing itself anew each dawn." She released the wrist. "You are free to stay. Food tastes better than fear." The woman spat at snow and stalked away. By evening, the makeshift fair spilled lantern light across Winterfell's courtyards. Bards traded songs that stitched old heroic refrains with verses about frost flames and 3-ring accord. Children paraded paper dragons trailing ribbons of pale ice. John stood near Wellhouse, listening, a rare softness on his weather-creased features. Night King emerged from shadows of the weirwood, unannounced yet unmistakable. Though some eyes widened, most had grown accustomed to his presence. A tall sentinel of quiet. He stopped beside John. Neither spoke at first. They watched two toddlers fling snow into brazier sparks, shrieking joy at each hiss. They learn quicker than their elders, John said finally. Night King inclined his head. Empty vessels, eager to hold song. He paused, then, almost reluctantly, continued, I walk beyond the frost fangs on morrow's dawn. John stiffened. Why? Comet's death left scar in unseen weft. I must trace wound's depth before next season knots around it. John thought of a kingdom still stitching wounds. Take riders. Void echoes easiest through many hearts gathered. Better one needle than bundle of spears. John hated the logic, but recognized it. Return before the last leaves fall, he said. Night King's gaze lifted to sky, where no stars yet pierced tranquil blue. Leaves will wait for our choosing. With that he stepped back into gloom, his silhouette dissolving. 2 days later, a raven reached Winterfell from Old Town. Archmaester Brulof's wax seal, but Sam's handwriting beneath. Strange lethargy spreads along whispering sound. Sailors forget names of winds. Maesters fear hush pockets lingering. Request guidance and more hearts. John read aloud to Sansa in Solar. She touched forehead line that had deepened these months. Every corner has hole to mend. I must ride south. She sucked breath, then nodded. At least you'll ride roads we hold. I can manage northern diplomacy. He placed foreheads together, tiny gesture of siblings who had lost too much to swallow goodbye ceremonials. Keep Arya near. That saffron faction may test patience. Joan's departure woke memories in Arya. Departure after departure, until every face seemed ghost. She busied herself training Mirror Guard recruits, blending Braavosi footwork with frost blade duels taught by Night King. In High Courtyard she sparred with dawn-scaled dragonlings that swooped low so cadets felt wind of apex predator, but learned nerve steadiness. She sensed each guard's pulse through soles of feet against ice, just as Syrio once taught her to feel lions lunge through marble vibrations in Braavos' marbled courtyard. But often between drills her gaze drifted to the northern gate, half expecting ghostly silhouette to return prematurely. Ghost sensed her restlessness, patting circles before curling at her knee. She stroked his ears. We keep watch, she murmured. South of the Neck John's party reached White Harbor under banners, no longer stitched with fish and mermen alone, but with new triple ring at Canton. Lord Roderick Manderley greeted him by docks. Fish smell thick in late summer air. He reported trade with Frostspire so profitable that Manderleys considered funding free hospitals along the Bight. But sailors now forgot to tie knots, or miscounted tides. A malaise not quite sickness. John walked docks and saw it. Rivermen staring at sun's reflection, wondering where north lay. Gull droppings uncleaned, nets half-cast. His hand closed about dragonglass dagger and belt. Memory failing, he whispered to Davos. Old Night nodded. Like they sail in dream. Together they spoke with victims. Each described moments when world dimmed to gray hum. Sam's letters had prepared them. Prisms dampening hush were strapped to lampposts along piers. But perhaps hearts tuned only to frost and flame needed new cord. Vara arrived next evening with Neha. They brought lantern prototypes she'd invented at Sam's urging. Tripli-tuned crystals changing color. When hung around harbor's mouth, their glow shifted, pulsing violet where hush pooled, then faded toward balanced aqua as night breeze dispersed tension. Sailors' eyes cleared. Names returned to lips. John drafted letters, one for Sansa praising Vahara's craft, 2 for Maesters explaining proper lens calibration, a 4th for Arya telling of memory storms and how lanterns pushed them back. He sealed scroll with wax bearing triple ring. The message never reached Arya. Before Raven could leave Rookery, a figure-robed saffron pressed blade of obsidian to Rookery Boy's neck. The bird flew, carrying false scroll forged swift. Accord fails. Manderley sails north with plague. Bar Frostspire. The assassin vanished, leaving Boy alive, but dazed. Arya received, forged message next dusk. Sansa stood beside, eyes scanning lines twice. Both looked toward North Road, where new caravans queued. Quarantine convoy. Sansa ordered. Guards lowered spears. Wagons halted in confusion. Ghost paced. Hackles risen. Arya's mind raced. Jon's writing felt off, but urgency gnawed. She interrogated Messenger Raven for time spent in flight. Studied wax. Similar, though color shade wrong. She fetched wax from Sam's desk. Mismatch. A lie. She muttered. But the seed sprouted doubt among townsfolk. The saffron preacher seized moment, preaching plague of memory rotting fishermen. Guards shifting, hands tightening on hilts. Trouble crackled like static. Arya confronted preacher on Outer Bailey. Through swirling snow, the woman smiled cold. Even forged voice of king proves how frail trust stands. You aim to break rope we're still braiding, Arya snapped. No, woman said, drawing tiny glass sphere glowing violet. We cut rope, so world may climb. She hurled sphere. Arya swung dagger, swatting midair. Sphere burst into dust that melted into hush wave, rippling minds of those near. Guards' eyes glazed. Some dropped weapons, forgetting purpose. Preacher shoved past stupefied watchers, vanishing. Arya hurled curses, slapped faces to wake them, but even Ghost reeled, spooked as if senses dulled. Lanterns over gate flickered red, then violet. Arya lunged to prism panel, retuned crystals. Glow steadied aqua. Wave receded. Guards shook heads. Shamefaced. Sansa found her minutes later, tight-lipped. Raven from Old Town. Sam confirms success controlling hush. Confirms your suspicion. Message of fraud. Arya hissed. They target communication. We require code words only, we know. Already drafting, Sansa said. But hearts bleed, trust each deceit. She placed hand on Arya's. Hold steady. Night King trekked alone across valleys north of Frostfangs, where no echo of human hoof ever lingered. Snow devils danced around him. Star creatures hidden beneath permafrost stirred at his passage. He reached Hollow Valley, whose air felt thin, not for lack of oxygen, but for lack of song. Here hush made cradle. He kneeled, pressing palm to ice. Fracture lines radiated in delicate web, singing dissonant hum. He closed eyes, exhaling ancient verse older than first tongue. A lullaby the children of the forest once sang to stars in hopes they would never fall. Frost condensed into crystalline seed on web's center. Hush retreated, wounded by memory's resonance. But the king felt deeper pulse. A will coiled beneath, pushing Hush forward. Next may be not satisfied with Comet's failure. He opened eyes and turned south. Distance meant nothing to time for beings who slipped between flurries. He arrived outskirts Winterfell in dawn's pale. Arya met him at gate, exhaustion carved beneath eyes. False ravens sowed turmoil. She reported. He listened, expression unreadable. We need new lattice for messages. Night King lifted gloved fingers still humming with valley's frost. We weave dream thread, he said. Ravens carry not ink, but echo tuned to heartbeats of senders. No hand may forge that voice. Bentol. Together with Bran, they spent nights forging dream rings. Thin discs of silver weirwood alloy, inscribed with runes representing single heartbeat signature. Slip one beneath Raven's breast feathers. Bird attuned to sender's pulse. Upon delivery, disc warms at receiver's pulse, verifying. Sansa dubbed them sigil seeds. Distribution began quietly. In White Harbor, Jon prepared to sail north with repaired ravens, still unaware his first scroll never arrived. Ships loaded with balanced hearts and new memory lanterns queued. He penned a brand new letter, sealed with fresh ring. Night winds tasted of kelp and copper. Stormsinger priests chanted to calm currents. Davos scanned horizon. Weather holds, he said. But tide watchers speak of silent tempest. They feel pressure drop without wind. Jon inhaled briny air. maybe Hush holding breath before next strike. At midday, they set sail. Rhaegal soared overhead, dawn flame circling further south. At dusk, horizon shimmered with column of pale fire far ahead. Frostspire's beacon? No, color wrong. Pallid violet streak ascending. Jon cursed. Another Hush breach. He signaled dragons to speed ahead, leaving ships to follow. They landed outside Frostspire at midnight. Arya greeted with relieved smile. Ghost bounded. Sansa waited in archway, holding forged letter to show brother. Jon's anger flared, then cooled. Strategist in him reevaluated thresholds. Night King emerged, announcing Hush pocket found and sealed. But threat grows clever. Bran rolled forward. Sigil seeds will hold deception at bay, but hearts may still fracture under barrage. Jon threw cloak onto Hook. Then we go to the root. Ashai's empty thrones. Arya tilted head. I've long wanted to walk shadowed quay. Karsi volunteered, Niha eager for maps. Vihara offered cooler sunstone lanterns. Sansa frowned but knew stasis kills as quick as risk. She would rule interim, forging alliances, training mirror guard. Plan formed. A smaller strike party than Kadath assault. For stealth suits, shadows. Dawnflame large enough for 3. Rhaegal for 2. Jon, Arya, Night King, Vihara. Bronn remote via Ravensight. Karsi and Niha by sea to meet at Shadow's mouth. 2 evenings later, after Festival of Equinox bathed Frostspire in ribbons of teal, they departed again, hearts steadied but nerves taut. As dragons gained altitude, Arya looked down at lantern-lit city, where children spelled their names in blue fire across ice, and her pulse sensed to disk at Raven's breast climbing beside them. She whispered, promise to Ghost howling below. We fly, we return. Ashai by the shadow welcomed no dawn, only smog that glowed faint charcoal, even at midday. Its harbor rotted with derelict junks, each hull dyed black by time. They landed on roof of a tower, built from fused vertebrae of unknown leviathan, entryway etched with glyphs that danced when lanternlight touched them. Vara led, reading half-remembered verses that once served as door prayers. Doors parted with sigh of ages. Inside, corridors slanted unnaturally. Perspective wavered. Night King's frost aura steadied geometry, forcing angles to obey logic. They passed petrified infants fused to walls, plates of gold leaf inscribed with names no throat could voice, pools of ink that reflected stars not found in any living sky. Finally they reached throne room, vacant dais of basalt, 3 seats, one cracked by fire, one crusted with ice, one immaculate void. Above, columns of shadow glass spiraled into nothingness. Jon felt heart quicken. Disc at his neck pulsed. Seers kneel here, he murmured. Night King approached void throne. Hear necks whispers. He lifted hand. Frost traced across seat, revealing outline of slender figure imprinted like afterimage. Rhaenys merely finger of deeper glove. Vara unhooked lantern, casting tricolored glow. Walls rippled, illusions falling. A library of star maps emerged beneath grime. Arya strode to shelf, fingertips brushing dust. She found scroll detailing, Great Forgetting. Prophecy of era when world tired of memories stacked and sought blank page. At margin scribbled update. Comet sign failed. Contingency Viper. She read aloud. Silence thickened. From behind throne rose sound of breathing. A figure cloaked in cobwebs detached, face encased in mirrored mask reflecting everything yet nothing. He or she. Spoken voice layered like overlapping waves. You trespass, heart of Hush. Accord births noise. Noise must end. Dying. Jon stepped forward. Noise is life. He drew Longclaw, its steel shimmering pale blue from lantern. We broke comet. Shattered orb. Yield. Mask tilted. Those were tests. True unmaking sleeps beneath Black River. We only need key. Soul balanced thrice. Eyes swung to Vihara, whose veins pulsed faint azure from lantern's proximity. Mask outstretched a skeletal hand. Night King threw Frost Spear. It shattered against invisible screen. Figure, let scarf slip. Flesh beneath translucent, veins swirling violet. As it advanced, Night King and Jon flanked. Arya spun behind, dagger drawing shallow cut across unseen barrier. Barrier flickered, parted. She lunged, blade slamming into Figure's rib just as Night King's palm met mask with blast of winter. Vara raised lantern, focusing tri-light into wound. Figure shrieked, voice unraveled into static. It folded like paper, collapsing inward until only mask remained, frozen mid-scream. Mask fell, cracked, releasing sigh that smelt of forgotten childhood and burnt parchment. Then nothing. Room's gloom lifted slightly. Shapes stabilized. Night King retrieved shattered mask, placing into satchel of unmelting snow. One more finger clipped, he said, but glove remains. Bran's voice whispered through raven perched above. River beneath city floods with hush. Collapse the thrones, close passage. Jon and Vihara pushed at dais. Arya wedged daggers. Night King summoned Rime to freeze basalt, then shattered with fist heavier than stone. Dais crumbled into pit. From depths surged black water flecked with twinkling stars. Lantern tri-light cast net. Water hissed, recoiled, sinking into cracks. Pit sealed as ice flowed. Fused with molten sunstone, Vihara poured along rim. Balance locked. They retreated along corridors now quieter, breathing easier though distance hummed. Outside they met Karsi and Niha, leading small group of Shadowlands villagers who wished to flee city that fed on dreams. Niha seaward waited, but tide seemed reversed, river of shadow bleeding seaward. Lanterns they carried pulsed, red then turquoise, then settled calm. They sailed at dawn, whatever dawn meant. Dragons overhead like guardian constellations. As towers of Ashai shrank, Arya looked back. For first time, faint sliver of true light kissed highest spire. Perhaps rumor, perhaps beginning. Back at Winterfell weeks later, caravans found rumors had cooled. Saffron Preacher captured plotting to poison Heartbrewer's wells. During her trial she spoke only word nex, then bit tongue, dying before sentence. In courtyard under sun that felt both warm and refreshingly crisp, mid-autumn optimal, Jon watched children raise kites shaped like triple rings. Night King beside him regarded sky. Silent as always. Arya joined, bandaged hand holding Ghost's leash. Sansa emerged with ledger citing memory lantern distribution, reaching as far as Sunspear and Skagos. Sam's letter said, hush storms dwindling to rare pockets quickly neutralized. Vihara forged partnership with Archmaesters for early warning prisms. Jon exhaled. Storm passed. Wave followed wave. Night King replied. Ocean abides. We learn its dance. Arya grinned. Better dance than drown. They stood three of many guardians, eyes on limitless horizon, aware respite might last years or hours, yet filled with quiet conviction that whatever rose, a new comet, new sect, new wound, they would meet it with tri-harmony. Ice steadied fire. Fire warmed ice, hush, reminded them, silence has edges, and together they would keep it from cutting deeper than the